Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey into one of history's bloodiest gambles, a moment when a 28-year-old exile with a ragtag army faced the most feared king in England. The odds, 1 in 10, the stakes, everything. His name was Henry Tudor, and on a muddy field in August 1485, he bet his life on a single battle that would birth a dynasty of power, passion and blood. This is where the Tudor story begins, not in a palace, but in the chaos of war. Now, before we step onto that battlefield together, I want to ask you something. If you are enjoying these deep dives into history's most fascinating moments, would you take just a second to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button? It truly helps me bring you more of these stories, and I am curious. Where are you right now? Are you in bed with the lights low, on a late-night drive? Maybe you're winding down after a long day. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from you. Alright, settle in, get comfortable, maybe turn on a fan or some gentle background noise, and let us step back in time together. August 22nd, 1485. Bosworth Field, Leicestershire, England. Imagine a grey morning, mist rolling across open farmland. The air smells of wet earth and horse sweat. Two armies face each other, but this is not a fair fight. Not even close. On one side stands King Richard III, the reigning monarch of England. He has around 10,000 to 12,000 soldiers, battle-hardened men, knights in full armour, archers, cavalry. He is the king, and he has the crown, the throne, and the might of England behind him. Richard is confident. Why would he not be? He has crushed rebellions before. He has survived political intrigue. He is a Plantagenet, a family that has ruled England for over 300 years. And across the field, Henry Tudor, 28 years old, an exile who has spent most of his life running from danger, hiding in Brittany and France. He has maybe 5,000 soldiers, a mixed bag of French mercenaries, Welsh supporters, and English exiles who believe he has a claim to the throne. His claim, by the way, is, well, it is complicated. It is thin, shaky even. His mother, Margaret Beaufort, is descended from John of Gaunt, a son of King Edward III. But here is the catch. That line was declared illegitimate. Legally, Henry should not even be in the running for the throne, yet here he is. Why would anyone follow him? Why would Henry even dare to challenge a king with twice his army? The answer lies not in military strength, but in desperation and brilliance. Let us rewind for just a moment, because to understand why Henry gambled everything at Bosworth, you need to understand the chaos England had been drowning in for decades. This period is called the Wars of the Roses, a brutal on-and-off civil war between two branches of the royal family, the House of Lancaster, symbolised by a red rose, and the House of York, symbolised by a white rose. Imagine it like this. Two powerful families, both believing they deserve the throne, tearing the country apart. Battles, betrayals, executions, and coups. Kings murdered, children killed, trust non-existent. Henry Tudor is technically from the Lancastrian side, though his claim is so distant it is almost laughable. His mother, Margaret Beaufort, is the key. Margaret is one of the most fascinating, underestimated figures in English history. She's only 13 years old when she gives birth to Henry. 13. Her husband, Edmund Tudor, had died of the plague just 3 months before Henry was born. So Margaret, barely a teenager herself, becomes a mother and immediately understands that her son is valuable and vulnerable. If the Yorkists find him, they will kill him. So she makes a decision. Henry must leave England. He is smuggled out to Brittany when he is just 14 years old, and he does not set foot in England again for 14 years. 14 years of exile. 14 years of uncertainty, of moving from court to court, relying on the generosity or political interest of foreign rulers. 14 years of waiting. But Margaret never stops plotting. She's like a spider in the shadows, weaving alliances, making connections, keeping her son's name alive. She is deeply religious, incredibly intelligent, and utterly ruthless when it comes to securing Henry's future. Some historians call her the real architect of the Tudor dynasty. While Henry is in exile, she is in England, working behind the scenes, and in 1483 something happens that changes everything. King Edward IV, a Yorkist king, dies suddenly. His 12-year-old son is supposed to become king, but Edward's brother Richard swoops in, declares the boy illegitimate and seizes the throne. The boy king, Edward V, and his younger brother disappear into the Tower of London. They are never seen again. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to them, but most people believe Richard had them murdered. These are the famous Princes in the Tower, one of history's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Now, this is where Margaret Beaufort sees an opening. Richard III is not popular. People are horrified by what happened to those boys. There is a sense of unease, of moral outrage. Margaret thinks, what if we could unite the two sides? What if Henry could marry Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of Edward IV? Elizabeth is a Yorkist princess. If Henry, a Lancastrian, marries her, they could symbolically end the war. Red rose and white rose together. It is brilliant. It is risky. But it could work. Margaret reaches out to Elizabeth Woodville, the mother of Elizabeth of York. Woodville hates Richard. He has declared her children illegitimate and possibly murdered her sons. She agrees to the plan. Margaret also sends word to Henry. It is time. Come back. Claim the throne. And so, in August 1485, Henry lands in Wales with his small army. Wales is important because Henry's grandfather was Welsh, Owen Tudor. The Welsh people see Henry as one of their own. As he marches through Wales toward England, men join him. Not thousands, but enough. Enough to give him hope. But let us be clear, this is insane. Henry has never commanded an army before. He has no real military experience. He's about to face a seasoned king with double his forces, and yet he marches on. Now, back to Bosworth Field. The two armies are positioned. Richard III is on high ground, a strategic advantage. He can see everything. His forces are organised, disciplined. Henry's forces are less so. They are a mix of different nationalities, different loyalties. And here is the terrifying part. Nearby, there is a third army. Around 6,000 men led by the powerful Stanley family, Lord Stanley and his brother Sir William Stanley. They are supposed to be on Richard's side. Lord Stanley is technically Richard's ally. But Lord Stanley is also married to Margaret Beaufort. Yes, Henry Tudor's mother. So where does Stanley's loyalty actually lie? No one knows, and that uncertainty is everything. Richard has tried to secure Stanley's loyalty by taking Stanley's son hostage. Essentially, Richard has said, if you betray me, your son dies. Brutal, medieval, effective? We're about to find out. The battle begins, and honestly, it is not going well for Henry. Richard's forces are stronger, better positioned. Henry's men are getting pushed back. This could be over quickly. Richard could crush this rebellion and secure his throne. But then Richard makes a decision that will change English history forever. He sees Henry Tudor across the battlefield. Henry is surrounded by only a small group of bodyguards. Richard thinks, if I kill Henry right now, this ends. I win. It is a bold, aggressive move. Very Richard. He is a warrior king, and he is not going to sit back and let his men do all the fighting. He is going to end this himself. Richard charges. He and his best knights thunder down the hill straight toward Henry. It is a terrifying, exhilarating moment. Richard actually gets close enough to kill Henry's standard-bearer, the man carrying Henry's banner. He's cutting through Henry's bodyguards. Henry himself is in real danger. This is it. This is the moment. And then the Stanleys make their move. Sir William Stanley, watching from the side, sees Richard surrounded by only a small group of knights. He makes a split-second decision. He charges in with his 3,000 men, not to help Richard, but to attack him. It is a betrayal, a complete, shocking betrayal. Richard's men are suddenly outnumbered and surrounded. They fight hard. Richard himself fights like a lion, but it is over. Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, is killed in the chaos. According to legend, his crown, his actual golden crown, rolls off his head during the battle and is found in a thorn bush. Lord Stanley picks it up and places it on Henry Tudor's head, right there on the battlefield. Henry Tudor, the exile, the longshot, the gambler, is now King Henry VII. It is one of the most dramatic moments in English history. A nobody, an outsider, has just won the crown through a mix of luck, betrayal, and sheer audacity. And here is the thing. Richard's body is treated terribly after the battle. It is stripped naked, slung over a horse, and paraded through the streets. Later, it is buried in a humble grave at Greyfriars Church in Leicester. For over 500 years, people assumed that grave had been lost, destroyed during the Reformation. But in 2012, archaeologists were digging in a parking lot in Leicester. Yes, a parking lot. And they found a skeleton. DNA tests confirmed it. This was Richard III, the last king to die in battle in England, buried under a parking lot. History has a dark sense of irony sometimes. But for Henry, the battle is only the beginning. He has won the crown, but can he keep it? England is exhausted, divided, traumatized by decades of war. The nobles are suspicious. The people are wary. Henry's claim to the throne is weak. Everyone knows it. He needs to legitimize himself, and fast. So he does something incredibly smart. He marries Elizabeth of York, just as he promised. January 18th, 1486, Westminster Abbey. It is not a love match, at least not at first, but it is a political masterstroke. By marrying Elizabeth, Henry unites Lancaster and York. Red rose and white rose. The symbol they create, the Tudor rose, is red with a white centre, both families together. It is propaganda, yes, but it is effective propaganda. It sends a message. The war is over. We are one now. And you know what? It works. Mostly. Henry and Elizabeth go on to have 7 children, though only 4 survive infancy. Child mortality is brutal in the 15th century. Among those children is a boy named Arthur and another boy named Henry. One will die young, tragically altering history. The other will become the most infamous king England has ever known. But that is a story for another time. For now, just sit with this image. A young man who had every reason to fail, who gambled everything on a single day, who won a crown in the mud and blood of a battlefield. Henry VII is not the most famous Tudor. That title goes to his son, Henry VIII, with his 6 wives and his legendary ego. But without Henry VII's desperate, brilliant, blood-soaked victory at Bosworth, there would be no Tudor dynasty, no English Reformation, no Elizabeth I, no Golden Age. It all starts here, with a man who refused to accept the odds. So the question is, was it courage, luck, destiny? Maybe all 3. What we know for sure is this. From that day forward, England belongs to the Tudors, and the Tudors will make sure England never forgets it. Now, in our next part, we're going to explore what happens after the battle, because winning a throne is one thing, but keeping it, that is a whole different nightmare. Henry VII spends his entire reign looking over his shoulder, crushing rebellions, dealing with impostors who claim to be the lost princes. He becomes paranoid, ruthless, and builds one of the most efficient and hated tax systems in English history. It is a story of fear, control, and the price of power. You will not want to miss it. Rest well, and I will see you there. So Henry has won the crown. He stands on that muddy battlefield at Bosworth, a golden circlet placed on his head by Lord Stanley, and for one brief shining moment, everything seems possible. The war is over, the Tudors have arrived, England can finally breathe. But here is what the history books often skip over. Winning a throne and keeping a throne are two completely different battles, and for Henry VII, the real war is just beginning. Picture this. You have just become king of a country that has been tearing itself apart for 30 years. The nobles do not trust you. Half of them think you are an upstart with a questionable claim. The other half are waiting to see if you are strong enough to survive. Your own allies might betray you tomorrow if someone offers them a better deal. And somewhere out there are people who believe they have a better right to your crown than you do. This is Henry's reality. Every single day. For 24 years. Let us talk about paranoia. Because Henry VII? He has every reason to be paranoid. And honestly, when you hear what he has to deal with, you might think his paranoia is not paranoia at all. It is just common sense. It starts almost immediately. 1487, just 2 years after Bosworth. Henry's trying to establish his rule, and suddenly there is a boy claiming to be Edward, Earl of Warwick, one of the last remaining Yorkist claimants to the throne. This boy, Lambert Simnel, is maybe 10 years old. He's being paraded around by Yorkist supporters who want to overthrow Henry. They take him to Ireland, crown him as king, and gather an army. An actual army. Thousands of men ready to fight for this child. Now here is the twist. Henry actually has the real Earl of Warwick. He is locked up in the Tower of London. So Henry does something brilliant and a little bit petty. He brings the real Warwick out in public, parades him through London, and basically says, "Look, here is the actual Earl of Warwick. That other kid is a fake." But the rebels do not care. They invade England anyway. Henry has to fight another battle, the Battle of Stoke Field, and he wins, but barely. It is brutal, bloody, and it leaves around 7,000 men dead. And what does Henry do with Lambert Simnel the impostor? He could have him executed. That would be the expected move. Send a message, show strength. But Henry does something unexpected. He spares the boy's life. Why? Because Lambert is just a pawn. He is a kid being used by ambitious men. So Henry gives him a job in the royal kitchens. Yes, you heard that right. The boy who tried to steal the throne ends up turning spits in the king's kitchen. Later, Henry even promotes him to falconer. It is a strange kind of mercy, and maybe a little bit of psychological warfare. Every time someone sees Lambert Simnel serving at a royal feast, they are reminded, challenge the king, and this is where you end up. But the pretenders do not stop. In 1491, another one appears. His name is Perkin Warbeck, and his story is even more elaborate. Warbeck claims to be Richard, Duke of York, one of the princes in the Tower, the boys who disappeared under Richard III's rule. Remember them? Warbeck says he survived. He says he escaped. And here is the terrifying part for Henry. People believe him. Powerful people. Foreign kings. Margaret of Burgundy, the sister of Edward IV and Richard III, recognises Warbeck as her nephew. She supports him. So does King James IV of Scotland. So does the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian. These are not random troublemakers. These are major European powers backing a pretender to Henry's throne. For 6 years, Perkin Warbeck is a thorn in Henry's side. He tries to invade England multiple times. He gathers support in Ireland, in Scotland, in Burgundy. Henry has to spend money he does not have, raise armies, stay constantly on alert. Imagine the stress. Imagine lying awake at night, wondering if this time the invasion will succeed, wondering if your nobles will stay loyal or switch sides, wondering if the boy claiming to be a lost prince is actually telling the truth. Because what if he is? What if one of those princes did survive? Eventually, in 1497, Warbeck's luck runs out. He tries to launch a rebellion in Cornwall, it fails, and he surrenders. Henry, again, does not execute him immediately. He keeps him at court, almost like a curiosity. But in 1499, there is a plot. Warbeck and the real Earl of Warwick, still imprisoned, supposedly plan to escape together. Whether this plot is real or manufactured by Henry's agents, we will never know. But it gives Henry the excuse he needs. Both Warbeck and Warwick are executed. Warwick is beheaded. Warbeck is hanged. And just like that, 2 of the biggest threats to Henry's reign are gone. But here is the thing. Even with these threats eliminated, Henry never stops looking over his shoulder. He cannot. Because the throne he sits on was won through violence and betrayal, and he knows, better than anyone, that it can be lost the same way. So what does Henry do? He tightens his grip. He builds a system, and that system is designed to do one thing: keep people too afraid or too poor to rebel. Let us talk about money, because this is where Henry gets really, really unpopular. He needs funds, constantly. Wars are expensive. Keeping nobles in check is expensive. Running a government is expensive. And Henry is deeply aware that his father-in-law Edward IV nearly bankrupted the crown. So Henry decides he's going to squeeze every penny he can out of his kingdom. He revives old, forgotten laws about feudal obligations, about land taxes, about fines for breaking minor regulations, laws that have not been enforced in decades, and he enforces them ruthlessly. He creates something called bonds and recognizances. Essentially, if you are a noble and Henry suspects you might be disloyal, you have to pay a massive bond, a financial guarantee of your good behaviour. If you step out of a line, you lose the money. It is a brilliant, horrible system. It keeps the nobles financially dependent on the king's favour. One historian estimated that by the end of Henry's reign, around 2/3 of the English nobility were under financial obligations to the crown. 2/3. That is not just taxation, that is control. And the men enforcing this system? Edmund Dudley and Richard Empson. These 2 names become synonymous with greed and oppression. They are Henry's enforcers, his tax collectors, his legal bullies. They go after nobles, merchants, anyone with money. They find obscure legal reasons to fine people. They demand payments for pardons, for licenses, for permissions. They are incredibly efficient, and they are incredibly hated. People despise them, but Henry does not care, because they are doing exactly what he needs them to do, filling the royal treasury and keeping potential rebels too broke to cause trouble. There is a story, probably exaggerated, but it gives you a sense of how people felt, about a wealthy widow who was fined because her house was too beautiful. Yes, too beautiful. The logic was that if she could afford such a nice house, she must have more money than she declared, so she owed back taxes. It is absurd, it is cruel, but it is effective. By the time Henry dies, he has amassed a fortune. Some estimates put his wealth at around £1.8 million, equivalent to hundreds of millions in today's money. He is one of the richest kings England has ever had. But at what cost? Now, let us talk about family. Because for all his political manoeuvring, Henry does genuinely seem to love his wife, Elizabeth of York. Their marriage starts as a political arrangement, sure, but over time something real develops. They have 7 children together, though as I mentioned, only 4 survive infancy: Arthur, Margaret, Henry, and Mary. Elizabeth is a steadying presence. She is beloved by the people. She is, after all, the daughter of Edward IV, a Yorkist princess. She gives Henry's rule a sense of legitimacy, and by all accounts, Henry respects her. When she is pregnant or ill, he is attentive. He does not take mistresses, unusual for a king in this era. It is not a fairy tale romance, but it is a partnership. Their eldest son, Arthur, is the hope of the dynasty. Born in 1486, just 9 months after Henry and Elizabeth's wedding. He is named Arthur deliberately, a callback to the legendary King Arthur, a symbol of English greatness. Henry is betting everything on this boy. Arthur is going to be the king who unites England, who brings stability, who fulfills the Tudor promise. From a young age, Arthur is trained for kingship. He is educated by the best tutors. He learns Latin, French, history, music, diplomacy. He is betrothed to Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. Yes, the same Ferdinand and Isabella who funded Christopher Columbus. This marriage is a huge deal. It is a political alliance between England and Spain, 2 rising powers. It signals that England is a serious player on the European stage. In 1501, Catherine arrives in England. She's 15 years old. Arthur is also 15. They are married in a grand ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral. The whole country celebrates. This is the future. Arthur and Catherine, king and queen, uniting England and Spain. Everything is going according to plan. The couple is sent to Ludlow Castle in Wales, where Arthur is supposed to govern as Prince of Wales. They are young, newly married, their whole lives ahead of them. And then, in April 1502, Arthur dies, just like that. He's only 15 years old. The cause of death is believed to be sweating sickness, a mysterious, terrifying disease that appears in England during this period. It strikes fast. One day you are fine, the next day you're burning with fever, drenched in sweat, struggling to breathe, and within hours you are dead. No one knows what causes it. No one knows how to cure it. It kills rich and poor, young and old, and it takes Prince Arthur. Imagine the grief. Henry and Elizabeth lose their firstborn son, their heir, the boy they have pinned all their hopes on. Elizabeth is reportedly devastated. Henry, stoic as always in public, is privately shattered. But there is no time to grieve, because now everything has changed. The succession is in danger. Arthur's younger brother Henry is only 10 years old. He was never supposed to be king. He was raised to be a duke, maybe a church official. Now, suddenly, he is the heir to the throne. And this 10-year-old boy, this boy who loves hunting and music and showing off, is going to grow up to become Henry VIII, the most infamous king in English history. But we are not there yet. For now, in 1502, the Tudors are reeling. And there is another question. What happens to Catherine of Aragon? She was married to Arthur, but Arthur is dead. She's a widow in a foreign country. Spain has already paid part of her dowry. Henry VII does not want to give that money back. And he does not want to lose the Spanish alliance, so a plan is hatched. Catherine will marry Arthur's younger brother Henry. Yes, the same Henry who is now heir to the throne. Now technically, marrying your brother's widow is forbidden by the church. It is considered incest. But there is a loophole. If Arthur and Catherine's marriage was never consummated, if they never had sex, then technically they were never truly married in the eyes of God. So Catherine swears under oath that her marriage to Arthur was never consummated. She swears that she is still a virgin, and based on that oath, the Pope grants a dispensation. Catherine can marry Henry. Problem solved. Except, as we will learn in future parts of this story, this decision, this lie or truth, depending on who you believe, will come back to haunt everyone. It will be the spark that ignites the English Reformation. But that is a story for another time. For now, Henry VII has survived rebellions, impostors, financial crises, and the heartbreaking loss of his son. He has turned England from a war-torn mess into a relatively stable, relatively wealthy kingdom. But he has done it through fear, through control, through squeezing his people dry. And when he dies in 1509, there is relief. People are glad he is gone. They are tired of his taxes, his paranoia, his iron grip. They are ready for something new, something bright, something hopeful, and they are about to get it, in the form of a handsome, athletic, charismatic 17-year-old king. A king who will take everything his father built and set it on fire. But before we meet that king in full, we need to understand one last thing about Henry VII. He died a deeply anxious man. Despite all his wealth, all his control, he never truly felt safe. And maybe that is the real curse of winning a crown through bloodshed. You never stop expecting someone to take it from you the same way. In our next part, we step into the light. We meet young Henry VIII, before the wives, before the break with Rome, before the darkness. We're talking about the golden boy, the prince every kingdom dreamed of having. Tall, handsome, athletic, intelligent, adored. It is almost impossible to imagine that this shining young man will become the tyrant history remembers. But that transformation, it is one of the most fascinating tragic arcs in English history, and we are going there next. April 21st, 1509, Westminster Abbey. England has a new king, and he is nothing like his father. Where Henry VII was cautious, calculating and cold, his son is the opposite in every way. Henry VIII is 17 years old. He stands 6 feet 2 inches tall, absolutely towering for the time, when the average man is maybe 5'6". He has broad shoulders, a slim waist, and legs so muscular from riding and jousting that people actually comment on them. Yes, seriously. Tudor courtiers write admiringly about the king's calves. He has reddish gold hair, pale skin, and a face that is, by all contemporary accounts, genuinely handsome. He's also athletic, intelligent, musically gifted, and charming. This is not just royal propaganda. Even foreign ambassadors who have no reason to flatter him are impressed. One Venetian diplomat writes home describing Henry as the handsomest potentate I ever set eyes on. Another describes him as extremely handsome. Nature could not have done more for him. This is the Renaissance prince every kingdom dreams of, and England, after 24 years of Henry VII's penny-pinching paranoia, is absolutely thrilled. The old king is dead. Long live the young, glorious king. Let the good times roll. One of Henry's first acts as king, he arrests Edmund Dudley and Richard Empson, his father's hated tax collectors, the men who squeezed the nobility dry. He has them executed on trumped-up charges of treason. Is it justice? Not really. It is political theatre. Henry is sending a message. I am not my father. The age of fear and taxes is over. The age of glory begins now, and the people love him for it. In fact, those executions are so popular that they are celebrated in the streets. That is how much people hated Dudley and Empson. But let us pause and think about this for a moment, because even in this moment of celebration there is a shadow. Henry is willing to execute men, possibly innocent men, to win public approval. He is 17 years old, and he already understands the power of spectacle, of violence as performance. Keep that in mind. It will matter later. Now, 11 days after becoming king, Henry does something else that defines his early reign. He marries Catherine of Aragon. Remember her? Arthur's widow. The Spanish princess who's been stuck in England for 7 years in a kind of legal and financial limbo, waiting to see what would happen to her. Well, young Henry decides to honour his father's arrangement. He marries Catherine. But here is the thing. This is not just a political duty for Henry. He seems to genuinely like her. Catherine is 23, 6 years older than Henry. She's educated, dignified, deeply religious, and she has survived years of uncertainty with grace. She's also, importantly, a princess of Spain, one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe. Marrying her makes Henry look good on the international stage. The wedding is private, almost secretive. But the coronation that follows? Oh, that is a spectacle. June 24th, 1509. Westminster Abbey is packed. Henry and Catherine are crowned together in a ceremony dripping with gold, jewels, silk, and pageantry. There are feasts, tournaments, music. Henry rides through London in procession, and the crowds go wild. This is their golden boy, their hope, their future. And for a while, a brief, shining while, it really does feel like a new golden age. Let us talk about what young Henry is actually like, because the man we know from history, the bloated, tyrannical, wife-killing monster, that is not who he is at 17, not yet. At this age, Henry is energetic, almost hyperactive. He loves sports. Jousting is his obsession. He will spend hours in the tilt yard, practicing with lances, competing in tournaments, and he is good at it. Really good. He wins tournaments, he impresses the crowd. But here is the thing about jousting. It is incredibly dangerous. Knights die in jousting accidents all the time. Lances shatter, splinters pierce through visors, riders get trampled by horses. Henry's own advisors beg him to be careful. They remind him that he is the king. He is the only heir. If he dies in a tournament, the Tudor line is finished. But Henry does not care. He is young, invincible, and addicted to the thrill. He also loves hunting. Not the calm, meditative kind of hunting. We're talking about riding full speed through forests, chasing deer for hours, sometimes covering 30 miles in a single day. His courtiers struggle to keep up. Some of them are middle-aged men, and Henry is running them into the ground. But he loves it. The speed, the danger, the physicality of it all. And then there is the music. Henry is a talented musician. He plays the lute, the harpsichord, the recorder. He composes songs. You may have heard of Greensleeves. There is a myth that Henry wrote it for Anne Boleyn. That is probably not true, but Henry does write music, and some of it is actually quite good. He also loves dancing. He will dance for hours at court masques, showing off his agility and stamina. Imagine being a courtier at one of these events. You're exhausted, your feet hurt, it is 2 a.m, and the king is still spinning around the dance floor, grinning, demanding another song. Henry is also intelligent. He speaks fluent Latin, French, and some Italian. He is interested in theology. He will later write a book defending the Catholic Church against Martin Luther, and the Pope will reward him with the title Defender of the Faith. That title, by the way, is still used by British monarchs today, even though the irony is almost painful. Henry, Defender of the Catholic Faith, will eventually break with the Catholic Church entirely. But in 1509 he is a true believer. True. He hears Mass multiple times a day, he goes on pilgrimages, he is pious in his own way. But let us be honest, Henry is also spoiled, impulsive, and used to getting what he wants. He has been raised as a prince, surrounded by people who tell him he is special, brilliant, chosen by God. And now he is king, the most powerful man in England. He is 17, gorgeous, talented, and nobody can tell him no. Can you imagine? What would you do with that kind of power at 17? It is intoxicating. It is dangerous. In the early years of his reign, though, Henry is mostly interested in having fun. He leaves a lot of the actual governing to his advisors, particularly Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, a brilliant, ambitious churchman who rises to become Henry's right-hand man. Wolsey is essentially running the country while Henry jousts, hunts and throws parties, and Henry is fine with that. He trusts Wolsey, he likes Wolsey, for now. Meanwhile, Catherine of Aragon is trying to do her job as queen, and her main job in the eyes of the Tudor court is to produce a male heir. An heir who will secure the dynasty, who will prevent another war of succession. Catherine gets pregnant almost immediately. There is joy, excitement, preparation. But the baby is stillborn. It is a girl. The disappointment is crushing, but these things happen. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly common. They will try again, and they do. In 1511, Catherine gives birth to a son, a living, breathing baby boy. They name him Henry, after his father. The country celebrates. There are bonfires, feasts, church bells ringing. The Tudor line is secure. Except, 52 days later, the baby dies. No one knows exactly why. Just dies. Suddenly. Horribly. And just like that, the hope is gone. Over the next few years, Catherine has multiple pregnancies, multiple miscarriages, another stillborn son, another daughter who lives only a few hours. It is tragedy after tragedy. Can you imagine what that does to a person? Catherine is a deeply religious woman. She starts to wonder if God is punishing her. Henry is frustrated, but in these early years, he's still kind to her. He comforts her. They keep trying. And in 1516, Catherine gives birth to a daughter who survives. They name her Mary. She is healthy, strong, intelligent. But she is not a son. And in the world of Tudor England, that is a problem. A daughter cannot inherit the throne. Well, technically, there is no law against it, but it has never been done. The one time England came close to having a queen regnant, it led to civil war. Henry remembers his history. He knows what happens when succession is unclear. He needs a son. But let us step back from the domestic drama for a moment and talk about Europe. Because while Henry is jousting and partying, the European political landscape is shifting. There are three major powers: England, France, and Spain. And then there is the Holy Roman Empire, which is technically a collection of German states but is incredibly powerful. Henry wants England to be a major player. He wants glory, prestige, military victories. He wants to be remembered as a great warrior king, like Henry V, who won the legendary Battle of Agincourt. So in 1513, Henry decides to invade France. Because why not? He is young, he is energetic, he has money to spend. Well, his father left him money, and he wants to prove himself. The campaign is, let us say, underwhelming. Henry wins a minor skirmish called the Battle of the Spurs. It is called that because the French knights literally spurred their horses and ran away. It is embarrassing for France and gives Henry a small victory to brag about. He also captures a couple of small towns. But the campaign is expensive, exhausting, and ultimately does not achieve much. Meanwhile, back in England, the Scots invade. Remember, England and Scotland are not united yet. They are separate kingdoms, and they do not like each other. King James IV of Scotland, who is married to Henry's older sister Margaret, by the way, decides to invade while Henry is distracted in France. But Catherine of Aragon, who is serving as regent while Henry is away, handles it brilliantly. The English forces, led by the Earl of Surrey, crush the Scottish army at the Battle of Flodden Field. James IV is killed. It is a massive, bloody victory for England, and Catherine sends Henry a piece of James's blood-stained coat as a trophy. Yes, really, medieval romance is wild. Now, in 1520, something truly extraordinary happens. Henry wants to meet with Francis I, the young, charismatic King of France. These two kings are rivals, but they are also curious about each other. They are both young, both athletic, both obsessed with glory. So they arrange a meeting near Calais, in France. And this meeting, this summit, is so lavish, so extravagant, so over the top that it is remembered as the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Picture this: thousands of tents made of silk and golden cloth, fountains flowing with wine, feasts that last for hours with hundreds of dishes, jousting tournaments, wrestling matches, music, dancing. Both kings are trying to out-impress each other. Henry brings an entire palace, a temporary palace made of wood and painted canvas, designed to look like a building from a fairy tale. It is absurd, it is magnificent, and it is also kind of pointless. Because despite all the pageantry, despite the smiles and the toasts, England and France do not really become allies. Henry and Francis shake hands, exchange gifts, and then go back to being rivals. But there is one moment at the Field of the Cloth of Gold that is absolutely fascinating. Henry and Francis, both competitive and proud, decide to wrestle. Just the two of them, king versus king, and Francis wins. He throws Henry to the ground. Now this is a huge deal. Imagine being the courtiers watching this. Your king, the great Henry VIII, just got physically beaten by the French king. Henry is humiliated. He is furious. He wants a rematch, but his advisors quickly steer him away. Because the last thing anyone needs is for the two kings to start an actual fight at a peace summit. But that moment of humiliation, it stays with Henry. He does not like losing. He does not like being embarrassed. And when Henry does not like something, he tends to find ways to make sure it never happens again. Speaking of not liking things, let us talk about Anne Boleyn, because she is about to enter the story, and when she does, everything changes. Anne is not on Henry's radar yet, not romantically anyway. She's just another lady-in-waiting at court, one of many young women who serve Catherine of Aragon. But Anne is different. She is not conventionally beautiful by Tudor standards. She has dark hair, dark eyes, a sharp wit, and a confidence that borders on arrogance. She spent years at the French court, and she brings that sophistication, that edge, back to England. She is smart, she is charming, she knows how to work a room. And at some point in the early 1520s, Henry notices her. Maybe it is the way she laughs. Maybe it is the way she challenges him in conversation. Maybe it is simply that she is not like the other women at court who flatter and fawn over him. Anne does not fawn. She's not easy to impress. And Henry, who is used to getting everything he wants, suddenly wants something he cannot easily have. And that, as we will see, is where the trouble begins. But before we dive into the chaos of Henry's love life, before we talk about divorce and reformation and executions, we need to understand what that desire sets in motion. Because Anne Boleyn is not just a mistress or a romantic fling. She is the catalyst for one of the biggest upheavals in European history. Henry's obsession with her will lead him to break with the Pope, to declare himself the head of a new church, to dissolve monasteries, to reshape English religion and politics forever, all because of one woman who refuses to be his mistress and demands to be his queen. In our next part, we are diving into the heart of the drama, the king's great matter, Henry's desperate years-long battle to divorce Catherine and marry Anne. It is a story of love, yes, but also of power, religion, and betrayal. It is the moment when Henry stops being the Golden Prince and starts becoming the tyrant. And it all hinges on one question. Can a king divorce a queen? The answer will shatter England. Stay with me. There is a moment in every great historical drama when everything hinges on a single decision. A moment when one person's desire collides with an entire system, and something has to break. For Henry VIII, that moment arrives in the mid-1520s, and the question at the centre of it all sounds almost absurdly simple. Can a king divorce his wife? The answer, as it turns out, will tear England apart, redefine Christianity in an entire nation, and set in motion a chain of events that will echo for centuries. This is the story of the king's great matter, and it starts with love, or at least with obsession. By 1527, Henry has been married to Catherine of Aragon for 18 years. 18 years of trying, hoping, praying for a son. And what do they have? One surviving child, Princess Mary, now 11 years old, healthy, intelligent, but a daughter. And Henry has convinced himself that this is not just bad luck. He believes it is a curse, a divine punishment, and he thinks he knows exactly why. Let us go back to that crucial detail we mentioned earlier. Catherine was married to Henry's older brother Arthur before Arthur died. The marriage supposedly was never consummated. Catherine swore it was not. Based on that oath, the Pope granted a dispensation allowing Henry to marry her. But now, all these years later, Henry is reading his Bible. Specifically, he is reading the book of Leviticus, chapter 20, verse 21. And it says, "If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. They shall be childless." Childless. Henry fixates on that word. He has no son. Could this be why? Is God punishing him for marrying his brother's widow? Has his entire marriage been a sin in the eyes of God? Now you might be thinking, wait, does Henry actually believe this? Or is he just looking for an excuse to get rid of Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn? And honestly, the answer is probably both. Henry is extraordinarily good at convincing himself that what he wants is also what God wants. It is a talent he will refine over the years. But in this case, there is evidence that he genuinely believes his marriage is cursed. He has watched Catherine suffer through pregnancy after pregnancy, loss after loss. He has seen his hopes for a son die over and over, and Henry is a religious man, superstitious even. The idea that God is punishing him, that resonates. It makes sense to him, and conveniently, it also means he can pursue Anne Boleyn with a clear conscience. So Henry decides the marriage must be annulled. Not divorced, annulled. There is a difference. A divorce says, this marriage is ending. An annulment says, this marriage never really existed in the first place. It is a legal fiction, but it is an important one. If Henry can get an annulment, then technically, he was never truly married to Catherine, which means Mary is illegitimate, which means he is free to marry Anne and have legitimate sons. Problem solved. Except, it is not that simple. To get an annulment, Henry needs permission from the Pope, and not just any Pope, he needs it from Pope Clement VII. Now, Clement is in a very difficult position. On one hand, he wants to keep Henry happy. England is an important Catholic country, and the last thing Clement wants is for Henry to cause trouble. On the other hand, Catherine of Aragon is the aunt of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, the most powerful man in Europe. Charles controls Spain, the Netherlands, Austria, parts of Italy, and huge swathes of the Americas. He is Clement's protector, literally. In 1527, just as Henry is starting to push for his annulment, Charles's armies sack Rome. They ransack the city, imprison the Pope, and generally make it very clear who is in charge. So when Clement is asked to declare that Charles's aunt was never really married, to essentially call her a liar and her daughter a bastard, well, what would you do? Clement stalls. He delays. He sends envoys to England to investigate. He promises to consider the matter, but he does not grant the annulment. Henry, meanwhile, is getting increasingly desperate, and Anne Boleyn is not helping. Or maybe she is helping, depending on your perspective, because Anne is playing a very dangerous, very clever game. She refuses to become Henry's mistress. Her sister Mary had been Henry's mistress years earlier, and what did it get her? A brief affair, then dismissal, no power, no security. Anne watches and learns. She tells Henry, "If you want me, you have to marry me. Make me your queen, or nothing." And this drives Henry absolutely wild. He writes her love letters, passionate, almost desperate letters. 17 of them survive. In one he writes, "I would you were in my arms or I in yours, for I think it is a long time since we kissed." He signs it with a drawing of a heart. The King of England is lovesick, and the woman he loves will not sleep with him. It is like a romantic drama, except it is real, and the consequences are going to be catastrophic. Henry's chief advisor during all of this is Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. Wolsey is Chancellor of England, Cardinal of the Church, and one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. He has been Henry's right-hand man for nearly 2 decades, and now Henry is asking him to solve the Pope problem. "Get me my annulment," Henry says. "Make this happen." Wolsey tries. He really does. He uses every diplomatic trick he knows. He writes to the Pope. He sends envoys. He hosts a trial in England where the marriage is examined and debated, but it is not enough. The Pope will not budge, and Anne Boleyn hates Wolsey. She blames him for the delays. She whispers in Henry's ear, "Wolsey is not really trying. He is sabotaging you. He is loyal to the Pope, not to you." And slowly, Henry starts to believe her. In 1529, Wolsey fails to secure the annulment, and just like that, after nearly 20 years of loyal service, he is finished. Henry strips him of his titles, his properties, his power. Wolsey is arrested for treason and ordered to return to London, but he never makes it. He dies on the journey, reportedly saying, "If I had served God as diligently as I have done the king, he would not have given me over in my grey hairs." It is one of the saddest, most bitter lines in Tudor history. Wolsey gave Henry everything, and in the end, it was not enough. But Wolsey's fall creates a vacuum, and into that vacuum steps a new advisor, Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell is brilliant, ruthless, and utterly pragmatic. He is from a working-class background. His father was a blacksmith and a brewer. He worked his way up through law, trade, and politics. He is not charming like Wolsey. He does not throw lavish parties or build palaces, but he is effective, and he has an idea, a radical, dangerous, brilliant idea. He says to Henry, "Why do you need the Pope's permission? You are the king. You rule England." Why should some foreign bishop in Rome tell you what to do in your own kingdom? What if you declared yourself the head of the church in England? What if you cut ties with Rome entirely? Then you can grant your own annulment. You do not need the Pope. You are the supreme authority. It is a revolutionary concept. For over 1,000 years, England has been Catholic. The Pope is the spiritual authority over all Christians. Defying him is unthinkable. But Henry is not thinking about tradition. He is thinking about Anne, and Cromwell's plan gives him a way forward. So Henry begins to move, carefully at first, then more boldly. In 1531, Henry forces the English clergy to recognise him as supreme head of the church in England, as far as the law of Christ allows. That little phrase, as far as the law of Christ allows, is a compromise. It gives the clergy a bit of wiggle room. But it is the beginning. The following year, Henry stops paying taxes to Rome. He starts appointing bishops without papal approval. He's testing the waters, seeing how far he can push. And Catherine, she is devastated. She refuses to accept that the marriage is invalid. She says over and over that her marriage to Arthur was never consummated. She swears before God that she came to Henry as a virgin. She will not lie, not even to save herself. And honestly, whether you believe her or not, you have to admire her courage. She is a queen, a princess of Spain, and she is being publicly humiliated, cast aside, called a liar. But she does not back down. Then, in 1532, something shifts. Anne Boleyn, after years of holding out, finally sleeps with Henry. Why now? Maybe she senses that the annulment is close. Maybe she's tired of waiting. Maybe she miscalculates, but she becomes pregnant, and suddenly the timeline accelerates. Because if Anne is pregnant, and if the baby is a boy, then Henry needs that child to be legitimate. He needs to marry Anne immediately. In January 1533, Henry and Anne marry in secret. The marriage is performed by Thomas Cranmer, a reformist clergyman who Henry has just appointed as Archbishop of Canterbury. Cranmer is loyal to Henry, not to Rome. And in May 1533, Cranmer holds a trial, declares Henry's marriage to Catherine invalid, and announces that Henry and Anne's marriage is legitimate, just like that. No pope needed. Catherine is no longer queen. She's now called Dowager Princess of Wales, a title referring to her brief marriage to Arthur. Her daughter Mary is declared illegitimate, and Anne Boleyn is crowned Queen of England on June 1st, 1533. She's already 6 months pregnant. The coronation is extravagant. Feasts, pageantry, processions through London. But not everyone is celebrating. Many people still love Catherine. They see Anne as a homewrecker, an opportunist. There are reports that when Anne's coronation procession passed through the streets, some people stayed silent instead of cheering. Some even booed. Anne notices, and she does not forget. In September 1533, Anne gives birth. The astrologers have predicted a boy. The plans are made for a prince. Letters are written announcing the birth of a son. And then, it is a girl. Another girl. They name her Elizabeth. The same Elizabeth who will one day become the greatest queen England ever has. But in 1533 she is a disappointment. Henry is gracious in public, but privately he must be reeling. He has torn his kingdom apart, broken with the Pope, humiliated his first wife, all for a son, and he gets another daughter. You can almost hear the universe laughing, but Henry is not done. He has started something, and there is no going back now. In 1534, Parliament passes the Act of Supremacy. This is the big one. The law that officially declares Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. Not as far as the law of Christ allows, just the supreme head. Period. England is no longer Catholic. Well, it is still Catholic in practice. The services are the same, the beliefs are mostly the same. But the Pope has no authority. Henry is in charge. It is an earthquake in the religious landscape of Europe. And it is all because a king wanted to marry a woman who refused to be his mistress. Now, not everyone accepts this. There are people who believe that the Pope is the rightful head of the Church, that Henry is committing heresy, that this is wrong, and the most famous of these people is Thomas More. You might know him. He is a scholar, a lawyer, a deeply religious man. He was Lord Chancellor of England after Wolsey's fall. He is brilliant, principled, and beloved by intellectuals across Europe. He is also Henry's friend. They have spent hours together, debating philosophy and theology. But More cannot accept the act of supremacy. He believes it is a sin. He refuses to swear the oath recognizing Henry as head of the Church, and that refusal is treason. Henry begs More to change his mind. Seriously, he does. He sends envoys, offers compromises, tries to find a way out. Because executing Thomas More is going to look bad. More is famous. He is respected. He is a man of conscience, but More will not bend. He stays silent on the matter in public, but his silence is its own statement. In 1535, More is put on trial. The evidence against him is thin, mostly based on things he supposedly said in private, but the verdict is predetermined. He's found guilty of treason and sentenced to death. On July 6, 1535, Thomas More is beheaded on Tower Hill. His last words are reportedly, "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." It is a line that will echo through history, a reminder that some people cannot be bought, cannot be bullied, cannot be broken. And More is not the only one. John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester, is also executed for refusing the oath. He is an old man, a scholar, a man who has done nothing but serve the Church his entire life. The Pope, in a final act of defiance, makes Fisher a cardinal just before his execution. Henry is furious and says something like, "Well, he can wear his cardinal's hat on his shoulders then, because he will not have a head to put it on." Dark humour from a king spiralling into tyranny. Fisher is beheaded in June 1535. His head is displayed on London Bridge as a warning. These executions send a message: defy the king and you die. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter what you have done for him in the past. Loyalty only counts if it is absolute. And with that message delivered, Henry tightens his grip. Because now that he has broken with Rome, now that he has declared himself supreme head of the Church, he has access to something he desperately needs: money. And that money is sitting in monasteries all across England, just waiting to be taken. Which brings us to the next chapter of this story, the dissolution of the monasteries, the greatest heist in English history. And it is going to change the landscape of England forever. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your local church, the place where your family has worshipped for generations, where your grandparents were married, where your children were baptized, is being stripped bare. The stained glass windows are smashed. The golden chalices are carted away. The monks who ran the hospital, the school, the shelter for travellers, gone, evicted, and the buildings themselves, sold off to the highest bidder or left to crumble into ruins. This is not some dystopian fantasy. This is England, 1536 to 1540. And it is happening on the orders of King Henry VIII. Welcome to the dissolution of the monasteries, the largest, most systematic seizure of property in English history. And it is orchestrated by one man, Thomas Cromwell. Let us set the scene. By 1535, Henry has broken with Rome. He is supreme head of the Church of England. But there is a problem, actually several problems. First, Henry is broke. The wars with France, the lavish spending, the cost of running a royal court, it has all drained the treasury. Second, the monasteries are rich, incredibly rich. We're talking about over 800 religious houses scattered across England and Wales, abbeys, priories, convents, friaries. They own about 1/4 of all the land in England, 1/4. They collect rents from tenants, they run farms, they hold treasures, gold, silver, jewels, ancient manuscripts. Estimates suggest the monasteries control wealth equivalent to billions of pounds in today's money. And third, this is the key part, the monasteries are loyal to Rome. They're part of the old Catholic system. They represent everything Henry has just broken away from. So in Henry and Cromwell's eyes, they are a threat. A wealthy, powerful, ideologically opposed threat sitting right in the heart of England. Thomas Cromwell looks at this situation and sees an opportunity, a brilliant, ruthless, utterly pragmatic opportunity. He says to Henry, "These monasteries are corrupt. They are full of lazy monks who do not follow their vows. They hoard wealth while people starve. They are loyal to the Pope, not to you. We should shut them down, dissolve them, take their wealth, redistribute their land. It will fill the royal treasury, weaken the old church and strengthen your power." And Henry, who needs money and loves the idea of weakening his enemies, says, "Do it." So Cromwell begins, and he is methodical about it. In 1535, he sends out commissioners, royal inspectors, to visit every monastery in England. Their job is to compile reports on the state of these institutions. Are the monks following their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience? Are they providing charity to the poor? Are they morally upstanding? Now you have to understand, these commissioners are not neutral observers. They are working for Cromwell. They know what he wants to hear. And what he wants to hear is that the monasteries are corrupt, lazy, and immoral. So that is what the reports say. They describe monks living in luxury, breaking their vows, engaging in sexual misconduct. Some of these accusations are probably true. Let us be honest, in any large institution, there will be some bad actors. But many are exaggerated or outright fabricated. It is propaganda. It is character assassination. And it works. In 1536, Parliament passes the first Act of Dissolution. It targets the smaller monasteries, those with annual incomes under £200. The logic is, these smaller houses are the most corrupt, so they should be closed first. Around 300 monasteries are shut down. The monks and nuns are given small pensions and told to leave. The buildings are stripped. The lead is pulled from the roofs. Lead is valuable. You can melt it down and sell it. The bells are removed. The altars are dismantled. Anything of value is taken. And the land sold. Often to nobles, to wealthy merchants, to anyone who can pay. And guess who profits the most? Henry and Cromwell and their allies. It is a transfer of wealth on an almost unimaginable scale. But here is the thing. People are angry. For many communities, the monastery is the centre of life. It is not just a religious institution. It is a hospital, a school, a source of employment, a refuge for the poor. When you dissolve a monastery, you are not just removing monks. You are removing social services. You are putting people out of work. You are closing hospitals. And in 1536, that anger explodes into rebellion. It is called the Pilgrimage of Grace, and it is the largest popular uprising of Henry's reign. It starts in Lincolnshire in October 1536, then spreads to Yorkshire and other northern counties. At its peak, around 40,000 people are involved. 40,000. That is a massive number for the time. They are led by a lawyer named Robert Aske. Aske is not a radical. He is not calling for Henry to be overthrown. He is asking, politely, respectfully, for the monasteries to be restored, for the old religion to be protected, for the king's evil advisers, meaning Cromwell, to be removed. The rebels carry banners showing the 5 wounds of Christ. They wear badges with religious symbols. They see themselves as pilgrims, not traitors. They are marching for God, for tradition, for their communities, and they vastly outnumber the royal forces in the north. Henry is, understandably, terrified. If this rebellion succeeds, his entire reformation could collapse. So he does what Henry does best. He lies. He sends the Duke of Norfolk north to negotiate. Norfolk meets with Robert Aske and the other leaders and makes promises. He says, "The king will consider your grievances. He will hold a parliament in the north. He will pardon everyone involved. Just disband, go home, and trust the king." And Aske, who genuinely believes Henry is a good man being misled by bad advisers, believes him. The rebels disperse. They go home. They think they have won, but of course they have not. Once the rebellion is over, once the danger has passed, Henry breaks his promise. Systematically, brutally, he orders mass arrests. Around 200 people are executed, including Robert Aske. Aske is hanged in chains at York, hung up in an iron cage and left to die slowly of exposure and starvation, his body displayed as a warning. Other leaders are executed in their hometowns, their bodies left hanging as a message. This is what happens when you defy the king. It is savage, it is cruel, and it is effective. There are no more major rebellions against the dissolution. With the pilgrimage of grace crushed, Cromwell moves on to the larger, wealthier monasteries. In 1539, Parliament passes the Second Act of Dissolution, targeting all remaining religious houses. And this time, there is no pretense. Abbots who resist are charged with treason. Some are executed. The most famous case is Richard Whiting, the abbot of Glastonbury. Glastonbury Abbey is one of the oldest, richest, most revered monasteries in England. Legend says it was founded by Joseph of Arimathea, that King Arthur is buried there. It is a place of immense spiritual significance, but it is also incredibly wealthy. And when Whiting refuses to surrender the abbey voluntarily, he is arrested, put on trial, and found guilty of treason. The trial is a farce. The verdict is decided before it even begins. In November 1539, Whiting is dragged through the streets of Glastonbury, taken to the top of Glastonbury Tor, and hanged, drawn, and quartered. His body parts are displayed in different towns. The abbey is dissolved. Its treasures are taken, and within a few years the buildings are being demolished for building materials. 1,000 years of history gone. Let us step back and think about what this means. Imagine you are a monk at one of these monasteries. You have dedicated your life to God. You have taken vows. You live simply. You pray. You serve your community. And suddenly, royal commissioners show up. They accuse you of corruption. Maybe you are guilty. Maybe you are not. They shut down your monastery. They take everything. They give you a small pension, if you are lucky, and tell you to leave. Where do you go? What do you do? You have no family, no trade, no home. You are set adrift in a world that is rapidly changing and does not particularly care about your plight. It is heartbreaking. And for the communities? Imagine you are a poor person living near a monastery. When you are sick, the monks run the hospital. When there is a famine, the monks distribute food. When you're travelling and need shelter, the monks take you in. And now, that is all gone. The hospital is closed. The charity has stopped. The shelter is a ruin. Yes, Henry and Cromwell claim they will use the monastery wealth to fund schools and hospitals, But in reality, most of that money goes into the king's pocket or into the pockets of the nobles who buy the land. The social safety net that the monasteries provided, it just disappears, and the poor suffer. But let us also be fair. Not all monasteries were innocent victims. Some were genuinely corrupt. Some monks and abbots had become wealthy and comfortable, far removed from the ideals of poverty and service. Some monasteries were badly managed. The system was not perfect. But the solution, dissolving all of them, seizing all their wealth, destroying centuries of religious and cultural heritage, that was not about reform. That was about power and money. By 1540 it is over. Every monastery in England has been dissolved. Around 12,000 monks, nuns and friars have been displaced. Thousands of religious buildings have been stripped, sold or demolished. The landscape of England has fundamentally changed. If you travel through England today, you can still see the ruins. Places like Fountains Abbey, Rievaulx Abbey, Tintern Abbey. They are hauntingly beautiful, these crumbling stone skeletons. But they are also reminders of what was lost. Not just buildings, but a way of life, a system of belief, a network of care and community. And the wealth? Estimates vary, but Cromwell and his agents seize assets worth somewhere between £1.3 and £1.5 million, equivalent to tens of billions today. It is the largest redistribution of land and wealth in English history until the modern era. Henry sells most of the land to nobles and gentry, which creates a new class of wealthy landowners who are loyal to him. Because now their fortunes are tied to the Reformation. If the old Catholic system is restored, they will have to give back the land. So they have every reason to support Henry and the new religious order. It is brilliant politics. Ruthless, but brilliant. Thomas Cromwell, the architect of all this, becomes one of the most powerful men in England. He is made Earl of Essex. He is rich, influential, feared. But power is a dangerous thing in Henry's court, because Henry, as we have seen, has a habit of discarding people who no longer serve his purposes, and Cromwell is about to make a mistake involving Henry's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. But that is a story we will get to. For now, just know that Cromwell's days are numbered. The man who destroyed the monasteries will himself be destroyed by the same king he served so loyally. As for the religious landscape of England, it is in flux. The monasteries are gone, but the country is not yet fully Protestant. Henry still considers himself Catholic, just Catholic without the Pope. He still believes in most Catholic doctrines. He still hears Mass, still goes on pilgrimages. The real Protestant Reformation, the theological shift that will come later, under his son Edward. But the groundwork has been laid. The break with Rome is complete. The wealth of the church is in the hands of the crown and the nobility, and there is no going back. Now, while all of this is happening, while Cromwell is dissolving monasteries and consolidating power, Henry's personal life is becoming a nightmare. Anne Boleyn, the woman he tore England apart to marry, is about to become his second victim. Because Anne has not given him a son. She has had miscarriages, and Henry is losing patience. Worse, Anne is sharp-tongued, confident, not afraid to argue with him, and Henry, who is now in his 40s, increasingly paranoid and tyrannical, does not like being challenged, especially not by a wife who was supposed to be the solution to all his problems. So he starts looking for a way out, and when Henry wants someone gone, he does not just divorce them, he destroys them. In our next part, we're going to dive into one of the darkest chapters of the Tudor story, the fall of Anne Boleyn, and years later, the almost identical fate of Catherine Howard. 2 queens, 2 executions, 2 tragedies that reveal just how dangerous it is to be the woman Henry loves. Stay close. What does it take to destroy a queen? Not just remove her from power, but annihilate her completely, her reputation, her dignity, her very life. In Tudor England, it takes 16 days. 16 days from accusations to execution. 16 days to go from being the most powerful woman in the kingdom to a headless corpse buried in an unmarked grave. This is the story of Anne Boleyn. And 6 years later, almost like a terrible echo, it will be the story of Catherine Howard. 2 queens, 2 cousins, 2 women who entered Henry's bed with hope and left it in coffins. And the question that haunts historians to this day is, were they guilty? Or were they victims of a king who had perfected the art of getting rid of inconvenient wives? Let us start with Anne. It is early 1536, and Anne Boleyn has been Queen of England for 3 years. 3 years of pressure, scrutiny, and failure. Because by Tudor standards, Anne has failed at the one job that matters, producing a male heir. She gave Henry a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1533. But after that, miscarriages, at least 2, possibly 3. And with each loss, Henry's affection cools a little more. By 1536, their marriage is in trouble. Anne is sharp-tongued and confident. The very qualities that attracted Henry in the first place now irritate him. She argues with him. She criticizes his decisions. She makes scenes when he flirts with other women. And Henry, who is now in his mid-40s, overweight from a jousting injury that refuses to heal, increasingly paranoid and convinced of his own righteousness, does not want a wife who challenges him. He wants obedience, adoration, and a son. In January 1536, Catherine of Aragon dies. Henry and Anne reportedly celebrate. Anne wears yellow, which is either a celebration or a complex statement about mourning customs. Historians argue about it. But Catherine's death changes things, because now, if Henry gets rid of Anne, he can marry someone else without the complication of having 2 living ex-wives. Catherine is gone. The path is clear, and Henry has already noticed someone new. Her name is Jane Seymour. She's one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. Yes, another lady-in-waiting. Henry has a pattern, and she is everything Anne is not. Quiet, submissive, pale and demure where Anne is dark and vivacious. Jane knows how to play the game. When Henry sends her a letter and a purse of gold coins, she returns it unopened, kissing the letter and saying she cannot accept gift from the king because she values her honour. It is the exact same move Anne pulled years earlier, and it works. Henry is hooked. But how do you get rid of a queen? Divorce? No, Henry tried that with Catherine, and it took 6 years and split the church. He needs something faster, something final. Enter Thomas Cromwell. Now, Cromwell and Anne have a complicated relationship. He helped Henry marry her. But Anne has been pushing for radical Protestant reforms, and Cromwell is more moderate. Anne has also been criticising his handling of the monastery wealth. She thinks it should go to charity and education, not into Henry's wars. They are on a collision course, and Cromwell is pragmatic enough to know, if it is going to be her or me, it is going to be her. So Cromwell builds a case, and it is spectacular in its horror. He accuses Anne of adultery, not just with one man, but with 5. 5 different men, including her own brother, George Boleyn. The charges are absurd. They claim Anne had sexual relationships with court musicians, with courtiers, with her brother. They provide specific dates and locations, many of which can be proven false. On several of the dates when Anne was supposedly having affairs, she was either in a different location entirely or visibly pregnant. The evidence is flimsy at best, but it does not matter, because once the accusations are made, the machine is in motion. On May 2nd, 1536, Anne is arrested during a May Day tournament. One moment she's watching the jousting, the next she's being escorted to the Tower of London. She reportedly asks over and over, "Wherefore am I here?" No one will tell her. The men accused with her are also arrested. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, Henry Norris, a close friend of the king, William Brereton, a courtier, Francis Weston, another courtier, and George Boleyn, her brother. Smeaton, under torture, or the threat of it, confesses to adultery with the Queen. The others deny everything, but Smeaton's confession is all Cromwell needs. The trials are quick. Smeaton, Norris, Brereton and Weston are tried on May 12th. They are found guilty and sentenced to death. George Boleyn is tried separately on May 15th. The charges against him are particularly vile, not just adultery, but incest. The evidence includes a claim that Anne mocked the king's sexual performance to her brother. It is character assassination at its most vicious. George denies everything. He gives eloquent, dignified defence. It does not matter. He is found guilty. On May 15th, Anne herself is tried. She is brought before a court of her peers, 26 lords, including her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, who presides. She is accused of adultery, incest, and plotting to kill the king. Yes, they throw in treason for good measure. Anne defends herself brilliantly. She is calm, articulate, forceful. She dismantles the charges one by one, but the verdict is predetermined. Every single lord votes guilty, every single one. The sentence is death, either by burning at the stake or beheading at the king's pleasure. Anne reportedly says, "I am prepared to die, but I am very sorry that men who were innocent and loyal to their king must lose their lives because of me." Even in her darkest moment, she thinks of others. Henry, showing a strange and twisted sense of mercy, commutes the burning sentence. Anne will be beheaded, but not with an axe. Those executions are often botched, requiring multiple blows. No, Henry imports a swordsman from Calais, a French expert executioner, to do the job cleanly with the sword. Some historians think this is Henry being merciful, sparing Anne a more brutal death. Others think it is Henry being practical. He wants this done quickly and without scandal. Either way, it is the only consideration he shows her. On May 17th, the 5 men are executed. George Boleyn and the others are beheaded on Tower Hill. Their final speeches are carefully worded. They admit to being sinners in a general sense, but none of them explicitly confess to the crimes they were convicted of. George's speech is particularly moving. He warns against the dangers of lust and sin, but he does not say, "I slept with my sister." He cannot, because he did not. 2 days later, on May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn is executed on Tower Green. It is a private execution within the Tower walls, not a public spectacle. Only a select group of witnesses are present. Anne is brought out wearing a grey damask gown and a crimson petticoat. Her hair is pinned up, her neck exposed. She is, by all accounts, composed, dignified. She gives a short speech, carefully crafted to protect her daughter Elizabeth. She says, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, according to law, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle, and sovereign lord." It is heartbreaking. She's praising the man who is killing her. Why? To protect Elizabeth. If Anne denounces Henry, Elizabeth could be further endangered. So Anne plays the game one last time. She kneels. The executioner is skilled. In one swift motion the sword takes her head. It is over in seconds. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, is dead. Her body and head are placed in an arrow chest. No proper coffin was prepared, and buried in an unmarked grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, within the tower. No ceremony, no dignity, just a queen, discarded like trash. The day after Anne's execution, Henry is engaged to Jane Seymour. 11 days later, they are married. 11 days. The speed is shocking even by Tudor standards. It shows you everything you need to know about Henry's feelings, or lack thereof. He is moved on before Anne's body is even cold. Now, here is the tragedy that makes this story even more heartbreaking. 6 years later, it happens again. Almost exactly the same way. Same accusations, same speed, same outcome. This time, the victim is Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn's first cousin, and the parallels are chilling. Catherine Howard becomes Henry's fifth wife in 1540. She is young, maybe 17, maybe 19, sources disagree. She is the niece of the Duke of Norfolk, the same uncle who presided over Anne Boleyn's trial. Norfolk, having learned nothing from Anne's fate, pushes his niece toward the king. Henry is 50 by this point. He is obese, his leg ulcer oozes constantly, he is in chronic pain, and his temper is legendary. But Catherine is presented to him, young and pretty and vivacious, and Henry, who has just suffered through a disastrous marriage to Anne of Cleves, a political match he hated from the start, is smitten. He calls Catherine his rose without a thorn. He showers her with gifts, lands, jewels. He is briefly happy again. But Catherine is young, very young. She was raised in a chaotic household by her step-grandmother Agnes Tilney, who ran a kind of dormitory for noble girls. The supervision was lax. As a teenager, Catherine had relationships with her music teacher, Henry Mannix, and with a young man named Francis Derham. These were not full sexual relationships with Mannix, probably, but with Derham, almost certainly. In fact, there was talk of a marriage contract between Catherine and Derham, which, if true, would mean Catherine's marriage to Henry is invalid. But when Catherine is pushed toward the king, no one mentions this inconvenient history. She marries Henry in July 1540, becomes queen, and for a while, all seems well. But then Catherine does something incredibly foolish. She appoints Francis Derham as her private secretary. Why? Maybe she feels obligated to help an old flame. Maybe Derham is blackmailing her. Maybe she is just naive. Either way, it is a disaster waiting to happen. And then, allegedly, she starts an affair with Thomas Culpeper, a courtier and a favourite of the king. Culpeper is young, handsome, everything Henry is not. Whether Catherine and Culpeper actually have a full sexual relationship is debated by historians. The evidence is murky, but they definitely meet in secret late at night, with the help of Lady Rochford, George Boleyn's widow, who apparently learned nothing from her husband's execution. In November 1541, Archbishop Cranmer, yes, the same Cranmer who annulled Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, receives evidence of Catherine's past relationships and her meetings with Culpeper. He investigates. He interrogates Catherine's servants. The story comes out, and Henry is devastated. He reportedly cries in front of his council. He calls for a sword, saying he will kill Catherine himself. He feels betrayed, humiliated, old, and once again the machinery of execution is set in motion. Derham and Culpeper are arrested, tried and executed in December 1541. Culpeper is beheaded, a mercy, since his status as a gentleman spares him the full horrors of being hanged, drawn and quartered. Derham is not so lucky. He suffers the full traitor's death. Their heads are displayed on London Bridge. Catherine is stripped of her title, declared guilty of treason by an Act of Parliament, No trial, just a declaration, and sentenced to death. On February 13th, 1542, she's brought to the scaffold on Tower Green, the same spot where Anne Boleyn died. Catherine is so young, so terrified, that she reportedly asks for the execution block to be brought to her room the night before, so she can practice laying her head on it. Can you imagine? A teenager rehearsing her own execution. The next morning she's led out. She's weak, trembling, barely able to walk. She gives a short speech, much shorter than Anne's, admitting she deserves death. And then, like her cousin before her, she's beheaded. Another arrow chest, another unmarked grave, another queen erased. Lady Rochford, who helped facilitate the alleged affair, is executed immediately after. 2 women, 2 deaths, 1 scaffold. So what do we make of these stories? Were Anne and Catherine guilty? The consensus among modern historians is that Anne was almost certainly innocent. The charges were fabricated to remove an inconvenient wife. Catherine's case is more complicated. She definitely had a romantic past before marrying Henry, and she definitely met with Culpeper secretly. But whether that constituted treason, whether she deserved to die for it, that is a different question. What is clear is that both women were victims of a system that gave absolute power to the king and zero protection to women, even queens. Once Henry decided they had to go, they were as good as dead. The trials were theatre. The verdicts were foregone conclusions. And here is the really dark part. Henry gets away with it. Both times. No one challenges him. No foreign power intervenes. Parliament supports him. The nobility supports him. Because by 1536, and even more so by 1542, everyone knows what happens to people who oppose Henry. You end up like Thomas More, like the monks at Glastonbury, like Anne, like Catherine. You die. After Catherine's death, Henry is a broken man. He will marry one more time, Catherine Parr, a kind, intelligent widow who manages to outlive him. But the damage is done. Henry is paranoid, tyrannical, in constant pain. The Golden Prince is long gone. What remains is a monster. But even monsters produce legacies, and Henry's legacy. 3 children, each of whom will take the throne, each of whom will shape England in radically different ways. One will be a sickly boy king who dies at 15. One will be a Catholic queen remembered for burning Protestants. And one will be the greatest Queen England ever had. In our next part, we meet the boy king Edward VI, and we watch as England tears itself apart over religion, power, and the question of who gets to rule. It is going to be messy. Stay with us. When a child becomes king, everyone around them becomes a vulture. That is not an exaggeration. It is a historical pattern. Because a child on the throne is not really ruling. The adults around them are, and those adults will fight, scheme, betray, and kill each other to control that child, to be the power behind the throne. This is the reality facing England on January 28, 1547, when King Henry VIII dies and his 9-year-old son becomes Edward VI, 9 years old. A child who should be playing with toys and learning his lessons is suddenly the most important person in the kingdom, and the men around him, they're about to turn England into a battleground. Let us paint a picture of Edward. He is a small, pale, serious boy. He has been raised in isolation, surrounded by tutors and servants, trained since birth for kingship. He is intelligent, genuinely intelligent. He speaks Latin fluently, he reads Greek, he studies mathematics and astronomy. He writes essays on theology. His tutors describe him as diligent, thoughtful, pious. But he is also fragile. He gets sick easily. He has respiratory problems, possibly tuberculosis or congenital syphilis inherited from his father, and he is solemn beyond his years. There are no accounts of Edward laughing, playing pranks, being a normal child. He has been moulded into a miniature adult, a perfect Protestant prince. And that last part, Protestant, is key, because Edward is a true believer. Remember, Henry VIII broke with Rome, but he kept most Catholic practices. He still believed in the Mass, in saints, in transubstantiation. He was Catholic without the Pope. But Edward has been raised by Protestant tutors. He has been taught that Catholicism is idolatry, that the Pope is the Antichrist, that England must be purified of all Catholic influences. He is a zealot, a 9-year-old zealot, and that is going to cause problems. Henry knew his son was too young to rule, so in his will he set up a regency council, 16 men who are supposed to govern England together until Edward comes of age. Equal power, collective decision-making. It is a nice idea. It lasts about 5 minutes. Because one man on that council, Edward Seymour, the Duke of Somerset, is not interested in sharing power. Somerset is Edward's uncle. His mother, Jane Seymour, was Somerset's sister. So Somerset argues, I am the king's uncle, his closest living relative on his mother's side. I should be Lord Protector. I should have ultimate authority. And because Somerset is ambitious, charismatic, and backed by military force, the other council members agree, some eagerly, some reluctantly. Either way, Somerset is now the most powerful man in England, and he has plans, big, radical, dangerous plans. Somerset is a Protestant reformer, not a moderate one. He wants to transform England into a fully Protestant nation. Under his leadership, the government passes laws that dismantle the remaining Catholic structures. In 1547, all religious images are ordered to be removed from churches. Statues of saints smashed, paintings of the Virgin Mary destroyed, stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes shattered. It is iconoclasm on a massive scale. Walk into any English church in 1547, and it is rich with colour, art, centuries of devotion made visible. Walk into that same church a year later, and it is whitewashed walls and empty niches. For Catholics, it is heartbreaking. For Protestants, it is purification. For most ordinary people, it is confusing and distressing. In 1549, Somerset goes even further. He introduces the Book of Common Prayer, written by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. This book replaces the Latin Mass with English services. Now, on one hand, this is revolutionary in a good way. For the first time, ordinary people can understand what is being said in church. The Mass is no longer in a foreign language, but on the other hand, it is a radical break with tradition. For generations, people have heard the Latin Mass. It is comforting, familiar, sacred, and now, suddenly, it is illegal. Priests who use the old Latin service are punished. People are being told that the religion they grew up with, that their parents and grandparents practiced, is wrong. Imagine how destabilizing that is. It is like someone coming into your life and saying, everything you believed was a lie. Start over, and people do not take it well. In 1549, rebellions break out across England. The most serious is in the southwest, in Devon and Cornwall. It is called the Prayer Book Rebellion, and it is exactly what it sounds like. People rising up against the new prayer book. The rebels are not trying to overthrow Edward. They are not attacking the king personally. They are saying, we want the old religion back. We want the Latin Mass. We want our traditions. Around 6,000 people join the rebellion. They march on Exeter. They besiege the city. They fight government forces. Somerset sends in troops led by Lord Russell. The fighting is brutal. The rebellion is crushed, and somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 rebels are killed. Killed for wanting to worship the way their ancestors did. It is a massacre. And Somerset's reputation takes a hit. People start to see him as harsh, out of touch, willing to spill English blood to enforce his religious vision. But the Prayer Book Rebellion is not the only uprising. In Norfolk, another rebellion breaks out, led by a man named Robert Kett. Now, Kett's rebellion is different. It is not about religion, it is about land. Specifically, it is about enclosure. Let me explain. For centuries, English villages had common lands, fields and pastures that everyone in the community could use. Poor farmers could graze their animals there, gather firewood, grow crops. It was a shared resource. But wealthy landowners have been enclosing these common lands, fencing them off, claiming them as private property, usually to raise sheep for the wool trade. Wool is profitable, but it requires far less labour than farming. So landowners kick tenants off the land, enclose the fields and raise sheep. The result? Lots of sheep, lots of profit for the landowners, and lots of unemployed landless peasants. Robert Kett is actually a landowner himself, but he is sympathetic to the peasants. In July 1549, he leads around 16,000 men in a march to Norwich, one of the largest cities in England. They camp outside the city, they set up a kind of alternative government, and they send a list of demands to the king. They want an end to enclosure, they want fair rents, they want corrupt officials removed. They are not revolutionaries, they are reformers. They believe the king is on their side, that he is being misled by greedy advisers. They even pray for Edward's health every day. But Somerset cannot tolerate a rebellion, even a peaceful one. He sends an army under the Earl of Warwick, a ruthless, ambitious man we're going to hear a lot more about. Warwick's forces crush the rebellion. Around 3,000 rebels are killed in battle or executed afterward. Robert Kett is captured, tried for treason, and hanged at Norwich Castle. His body is left hanging in chains as a warning. So, within a few months, Somerset has presided over two major rebellions, both brutally suppressed. And the Regency Council is getting nervous. Somerset is making enemies. He is spending huge amounts of money on wars with Scotland and France, wars that are not going well. He is alienating the nobility, and worst of all, he is failing to maintain order. In October 1549, the council turns on him. Led by the Earl of Warwick, they arrest Somerset, strip him of his titles, and throw him in the Tower of London. It is a bloodless coup. Somerset is eventually released and even allowed back onto the council, but his power is broken. Warwick is now in charge, and Warwick is a very different kind of leader. The Earl of Warwick, later made Duke of Northumberland, is cold, calculating, and utterly self-interested. Where Somerset had ideals, Warwick has ambition. Where Somerset wanted to reform England, Warwick wants to control it, and he is very good at manipulating young Edward. Warwick flatters the boy king, consults him on decisions, makes him feel important. Edward, who is now 12, 13, 14, starts to see himself as a real ruler, not just a figurehead, and Warwick encourages this, because a king who thinks he is in charge is easier to control than one who knows he is a puppet. Under Warwick's leadership, the Protestant Reformation accelerates. In 1552, a new, even more Protestant version of the Book of Common Prayer is introduced. Catholic practices are further restricted, altars are replaced with simple communion tables, priests are encouraged to marry, a direct rejection of Catholic celibacy. The English Church is becoming unrecognisably Protestant, and Edward loves it. He writes essays praising the reforms. He keeps a journal where he records in careful detail the progress of Protestantism in England. He is, in his own mind, doing God's work, saving England from the corruption of Rome. He is a boy, but he is a true believer, and that belief is going to lead to disaster. Because here is the problem: Edward is dying. By late 1552, it is clear that something is seriously wrong. He has a persistent cough, he is losing weight, he has fevers, doctors are baffled. Some think it is tuberculosis, some think it is a lung infection. Modern historians speculate it might be a combination of things: TB, pneumonia, possibly cancer. Whatever it is killing him. And by early 1553, everyone knows it. The question becomes, who will succeed him? According to Henry VIII's will, the line of succession is clear. After Edward comes Mary, Henry's eldest daughter, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, and after Mary comes Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Both have been declared illegitimate at various points, but Henry's will reinstates them in the succession. So legally, Mary is next in line. But there is a huge problem. Mary is Catholic. Devoutly, unshakably Catholic. If Mary becomes queen, she will undo everything Edward has done. She will restore the Catholic Church. She will reconnect England with Rome. All the reforms, all the changes, all the bloodshed, it will be for nothing. And Warwick, who has built his career on Protestantism, will be finished, probably executed. He has to stop Mary from becoming queen, so Warwick comes up with a plan, a desperate, illegal, doomed plan. He convinces Edward, who is 15 now, feverish and dying, to change the succession, to cut Mary and Elizabeth out entirely and name a Protestant heir. Who? Lady Jane Grey. Jane is Edward's first cousin once removed. Her grandmother was Henry VIII's sister. She's also deeply Protestant, well-educated, and crucially, she's married to Warwick's son. Yes, Warwick has arranged this marriage specifically to position himself close to power. If Jane becomes queen, Warwick's son is married to the queen. Warwick controls the throne. Edward, fevered and fanatical, agrees. He writes a document called My Devise of the Succession, cutting out his half-sisters and naming Jane as his heir. It is legally questionable at best, completely illegal at worst. Parliament has not approved it. It contradicts Henry VIII's will. But Edward is desperate. He cannot let England fall back into Catholicism. He would rather break the law than let Mary become queen. On July the 6th, 1553, Edward VI dies. He is 15 years old. He's been king for 6 years and has never really ruled. His reign has been marked by rebellion, religious upheaval, and power struggles, and now he is gone. A boy who never got to be a boy, a king who never got to be a king. Warwick moves fast. 4 days later, on July 10th, Lady Jane Grey is proclaimed queen. She is 16 years old. She does not want to be queen. By all accounts, she is horrified and tries to refuse. But Warwick and her family force her. She is crowned, and for 9 days she is Queen of England. 9 days. Because Mary, the rightful heir, is not going to give up without a fight. And the English people, whatever their religious beliefs, know that Mary is the legitimate queen. They rally to her. Thousands of men join her cause. Even some of Warwick's own supporters defect. Within days, it is clear that Jane is finished. On July 19th, the Privy Council abandons Jane and declares Mary the rightful queen. Jane is arrested. Warwick is arrested. And Mary, the Catholic princess who has spent years in exile and disgrace, rides into London in triumph. The people cheer for her. They light bonfires. They celebrate. Because whatever else Mary is, she is Henry VIII's daughter. She is the rightful queen. And England, exhausted by the chaos of Edward's reign, is ready for stability. even if that stability comes with a return to Catholicism. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, is imprisoned in the Tower of London. At first, Mary is inclined to spare her. Jane is young, she was a pawn, she did not ask for this. But rebellions in support of Jane and Protestant plots convince Mary that Jane is too dangerous to live. In February 1554, Jane is executed. She is 17 years old. She dies with dignity, reciting prayers, forgiving her executioner. Another young woman destroyed by the ambitions of powerful men. And with Jane's death, the Protestant dream of Edward's reign dies too. Mary is queen now, and she has plans. Plans to restore Catholicism, plans to punish heretics, plans to bring England back to Rome, no matter what it takes. England is about to enter one of its darkest periods, a time of burnings, fear, and religious persecution. Mary will be remembered not as Mary I, but as Bloody Mary. And in our next part, we're going to see how a queen who wanted so desperately to be loved became one of the most hated figures in English history. History remembers her as a monster, Bloody Mary, the queen who burned Protestants, the fanatic who tried to drag England back to Rome through fire and terror. But before she was Bloody Mary, she was just Mary, a girl who watched her mother be humiliated and cast aside, who was declared illegitimate by her own father, who spent years in danger and disgrace. And when she finally became queen at age 37, she had one desperate dream: to undo the damage, to heal England, to restore the faith she believed in. Instead, she became the villain of her own story. And the question we need to ask is, was she always destined to fail? Or did England and history fail her? Mary Tudor becomes queen on July 19th, 1553, and the country celebrates. Seriously, there are bonfires, church bells ringing, people dancing in the streets. This is not just about religion. This is about legitimacy. Mary is Henry VIII's daughter. She is the rightful heir. And after the chaos of Edward's reign, after the attempted coup by Warwick and Lady Jane Grey, people are desperate for stability. They want a queen who has a clear, undisputed claim to the throne. Mary is that queen. And in those first few weeks, there is hope. Real hope. Even Protestants are relieved, because at least the succession crisis is over. At least there is order again. Mary herself is overcome with emotion. She has spent decades believing she would never wear the crown. She has been called a bastard, stripped of her title, forbidden from seeing her mother as Catherine of Aragon lay dying. She has lived in fear that her father or her brother's advisers might have her killed. And now she is queen. She cries openly when she enters London. She thanks God. She promises to be a good, merciful ruler. And here is the thing. Mary genuinely wants to be merciful. In those early days, she pardons many of the people who supported Lady Jane Grey. She even considers sparing Jane herself, until rebellions and plots convince her that Jane is too dangerous to live. But her instinct is toward forgiveness, toward healing. She wants to be loved. But Mary has one unshakable conviction. England must return to Catholicism. This is not negotiable. In her mind, the Protestant Reformation has been a disaster. It split the church, caused rebellions, led to the execution of good people like Thomas More, and most importantly, it defied God. Mary believes, truly, deeply believes, that England is suffering because it turned away from Rome, that every bad harvest, every illness, every misfortune is divine punishment, and the only way to save England is to bring it back to the true faith. She sees this as her sacred duty, her life's purpose. God spared her, protected her, made her queen for this reason, to restore Catholicism, and she is going to do it, no matter what. The problem is, not everyone agrees. England has been Protestant, or at least semi-Protestant, for over 20 years. A whole generation has grown up without the Pope, without Latin masses, without monasteries. Many people are genuinely Protestant now. They believe in the reforms. They believe the Pope is corrupt, that Catholicism is idolatry. And even people who are not particularly religious are wary of change. They have gotten used to the new system. They do not want to go back, but Mary does not see it that way. She sees people who are lost, who need to be guided back to the truth. She sees it as salvation, not oppression. In 1553, Mary begins dismantling the Protestant reforms. The Book of Common Prayer is banned. The Latin Mass returns. Married priests are told to leave their wives or lose their positions. Catholic bishops who were imprisoned under Edward are released and restored to power. Protestant bishops are removed. It is a complete reversal, and at first people go along with it. Reluctantly maybe, but they go along. Because Mary is the Queen, and you do not defy the Queen, not openly anyway. But then Mary makes a decision that changes everything. She decides to marry. Now marriage is expected for a queen. She needs an heir after all. But the man she chooses is controversial. His name is Philip II of Spain. Yes, Spain, the most powerful Catholic nation in Europe, the son of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. Philip is 11 years younger than Mary. He is handsome, cold, politically astute, and has absolutely no interest in Mary as a person. This is a dynastic marriage, pure and simple. For Philip, marrying Mary means securing an alliance with England, possibly gaining control of the English crown. For Mary, marrying Philip means having the support of Catholic Europe, having a strong husband to help her rule, and maybe, just maybe, having a child, an heir, a Catholic heir who will secure the faith in England forever. But the English people hate this idea. They do not want a Spanish king. Spain is a foreign power, a rival, a threat. There are fears that Philip will drag England into Spain's wars, that he will treat England as a Spanish colony, that Mary will become a puppet to Spanish interests. Protests break out. The Privy Council begs Mary to reconsider, to marry an English nobleman instead. But Mary is stubborn. She's made up her mind. She loves Philip, or at least she convinces herself she does. She writes him letters. She prepares for his arrival. She dreams of the life they will build together. It is heartbreaking because Philip does not love her. He barely tolerates her, but Mary does not see it. Or maybe she does, and she chooses to ignore it. In January 1554, before the marriage even happens, a rebellion breaks out. It is led by Sir Thomas Wyatt, a Protestant nobleman. Wyatt raises an army of around 3,000 men in Kent and marches on London. His stated goal is to prevent the Spanish marriage. His unstated goal is probably to put Princess Elizabeth, Mary's Protestant half-sister, on the throne. The rebellion gets dangerously close to London. Mary's forces are outnumbered. For a moment, it looks like she might be overthrown. But Mary does something extraordinary. She goes to the Guildhall in London and gives a speech to the citizens. She speaks passionately, personally, emotionally. She says she is their queen, their anointed monarch, and she will not abandon them. She calls them her children, and the people of London, moved by her courage, rally to her defence. They close the city gates. They fight off Wyatt's men. The rebellion collapses. Wyatt is captured and executed, and Mary has won. But the rebellion has consequences. It confirms Mary's worst fears. There are people plotting against her, and they are using Elizabeth as a figurehead. Elizabeth is arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. For weeks, she is in mortal danger. Mary's advisors push for Elizabeth's execution. They say, "She was involved in the plot, she is a threat, she is Protestant, she will always be a rallying point for rebels. Kill her now." But Mary hesitates. Elizabeth is her sister, her father's daughter. And there is no concrete proof of Elizabeth's involvement in Wyatt's rebellion. Elizabeth has been very, very careful to stay quiet, to not put anything in writing. So Mary spares her. Elizabeth is eventually moved to house arrest at Woodstock. It is a reprieve, not a pardon. Elizabeth spends the rest of Mary's reign walking a tightrope, staying silent, staying alive. In July 1554, Philip arrives in England. He and Mary are married at Winchester Cathedral. Mary is 38, Philip is 27. The marriage contract says Philip will be king in name only. He will not rule England. He will not inherit the throne if Mary dies. But Mary adores him. She showers him with affection. She defers to his opinions. She is, for the first time in her life, happy, or at least she tries to be, because Philip is distant. He is polite, dutiful, but cold. He does his job, producing an heir, but there is no warmth, no love, and Mary knows it. You can see it in her letters. She makes excuses for him. She blames herself. She tries harder to please him. It is painful to watch. And then Mary makes an announcement. She is pregnant. The kingdom celebrates. If Mary has a child, a Catholic heir, the Protestant succession is broken. Elizabeth will never be queen. England will remain Catholic. It is everything Mary has hoped for. She feels the baby moving. She prepares the nursery. She writes letters about her joy. Months pass. Her belly swells. The due date comes and goes. Weeks pass. Nothing happens. Doctors are confused. Mary is confused. And slowly, horribly, it becomes clear there is no baby. Mary is experiencing a phantom pregnancy, a psychological and physical condition where a woman believes she is pregnant, exhibits symptoms like a swollen belly and missed periods, but is not actually carrying a child. It is devastating, humiliating. Mary has announced to the world that she is having a child, and now she has to admit there is no child. Philip, who stayed in England only for the heir, leaves. He goes back to Spain. He tells Mary he will return, but he does not for over a year. Mary is heartbroken, alone, and increasingly desperate. She decides that the phantom pregnancy is a sign that God is displeased with England, that the country has not done enough to return to Catholicism, that more must be done, and that is when the burnings begin. In February 1555, the first Protestant heretic is burned at the stake. His name is John Rogers. He was a Bible translator, a preacher, a man who refused to recant his Protestant beliefs. He is tied to a stake in Smithfield, a market area in London, and burned alive in front of a crowd. It is a public execution, meant to be a warning. But Rogers dies bravely, singing psalms as the flames rise, and the crowd is unsettled. Some people jeer, yes, but others are silent. Some even cry. Because burning someone alive is horrific. It is a slow, agonizing death. And Rogers is not a villain. He's a man of conviction, dying for his beliefs. And people see that. But Mary does not stop. Over the next 3 years, around 280 Protestants are burned at the stake. Men, women, even a few teenagers. They are accused of heresy, refusing to accept Catholic doctrine, refusing to acknowledge the Pope, refusing to recant their Protestant faith. The most famous victims are Thomas Cranmer, Hugh Latimer, and Nicholas Ridley, the Protestant bishops who helped create the Book of Common Prayer, who advised Edward VI, who shaped the English Reformation. They are tried, found guilty, and executed in Oxford. Latimer and Ridley are burned together in October 1555. As the flames rise, Latimer reportedly says to Ridley, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." It is one of the most famous quotes in English history, a statement of defiance, of faith, of martyrdom. Cranmer is burned in March 1556. His execution is particularly tragic. He is old, broken, terrified of the fire. Under pressure, he signs recantations denying his Protestant beliefs, hoping to be spared. But Mary will not spare him. He's going to burn regardless. And on the day of his execution, Cranmer does something extraordinary. He's supposed to read his recantation publicly, admitting his errors, but instead he denounces it. He says he lied, that he was weak, that he believes in the Protestant faith. And as a final act of defiance, when the fire is lit, he holds his right hand, the hand that signed the recantations, into the flames first, saying, "This unworthy right hand should burn first." It is a moment of incredible courage and drama, and it is burned into English Protestant memory forever. These executions are supposed to frighten people into conformity, but they have the opposite effect. People do not see heretics being punished. They see martyrs dying bravely for their faith. Protestant preachers in exile write pamphlets describing the burnings, turning the victims into heroes. The most famous is John Foxe's Book of Martyrs, which becomes one of the most widely read books in England for centuries. It cements Mary's reputation as a tyrant, a burner of innocence, a monster, and the nickname sticks, Bloody Mary. But here is the question: is Mary unusually cruel? Let us put it in perspective. In the 5 years of Mary's reign, around 280 people are executed for heresy. In the 45 years of Elizabeth's reign that follow, around 250 Catholics are executed for treason. Henry VIII executed tens of thousands of people over his 38-year reign. Burning heretics is not unusual in the 16th century. Catholic France burns thousands. Protestant Geneva burns heretics. The Spanish Inquisition is notorious. By the standards of the time, Mary is not an outlier. But in England, where there has not been systematic religious persecution on this scale before, it is shocking. And because Protestantism will ultimately win, because England becomes a Protestant nation, Mary is remembered as the villain. History is written by the victors, and Mary lost. Mary's final years are miserable. Philip remains in Spain. She has another phantom pregnancy in 1557, another humiliation. England is dragged into a war with France to support Spain, and it goes badly. In January 1558, England loses Calais, its last possession in France. Calais had been English for over 200 years. Losing it is a national humiliation. Mary is reportedly devastated, saying that when she dies, they will find Calais written on her heart. And in November 1558, Mary falls seriously ill. She's only 42, but she's exhausted, depressed, possibly suffering from ovarian cancer or uterine tumours. She knows she's dying, and she knows that Elizabeth, Protestant Elizabeth, will succeed her. Everything Mary fought for, everything she burned people for, will be undone. On November 17th, 1558, Mary dies. She is buried in Westminster Abbey. Her tomb is simple, unremarkable. She shares it, ironically, with Elizabeth. 2 sisters, 2 queens, 2 different Englands, buried together forever. So was Mary a monster? Or was she a tragic figure, a woman who wanted to save her country and ended up destroying her own legacy? The answer is probably both. Mary was a victim of her father's cruelty, of religious upheaval, of political machinations. But she was also a perpetrator of religious persecution, of executions, of terror. She was shaped by trauma and driven by faith, and that combination led her to commit acts that history will never forgive. And now, the stage is set for the final Tudor monarch, the one who will outshine them all. Elizabeth I, the daughter Anne Boleyn died for, the sister Mary almost executed, the woman who will become the greatest queen England has ever seen. Her story is next, and it is extraordinary. She has survived what should have killed her a dozen times over, declared illegitimate as a toddler, orphaned at 2 when her mother was beheaded, suspected of treason at 14, imprisoned in the Tower of London at 20. She has lived her entire life on the edge of a knife, one wrong word away from execution, and now, on November 17th, 1558, at age 25, Elizabeth Tudor becomes Queen of England. The moment the messenger arrives to tell her Mary is dead and she is queen, Elizabeth reportedly falls to her knees and quotes Psalm 118 in Latin. "This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvellous in our eyes." She has waited for this moment her whole life, and now that it is here, she has to figure out how to survive it. Because queens, as we have seen, do not tend to live long in Tudor England. Let us go back for a moment and understand who Elizabeth really is. Because the Elizabeth we remember, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the icon, that is the myth, the carefully constructed image. The real Elizabeth is more complicated, more human, more remarkable. She was born in September 1533, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. For the first 2.5 years of her life, she was a princess, heir to the throne, and then her mother was executed, her parents' marriage was annulled, and she was declared a bastard. Imagine being a child and suddenly being told, "You do not matter anymore. Your mother was a criminal. You have no legal status." Elizabeth grew up in that shadow. She was raised in relative isolation, shuffled between households, given a good education but very little security. She learned early that the world was dangerous, that trust could get you killed, that survival required intelligence and silence. When her father died and her brother Edward became king, Elizabeth was in a precarious position. She was Protestant by upbringing. Her mother's family, the Boleyns, had been reformers, but she was also pragmatic. She knew how to keep her head down, how to avoid making enemies, and then, when she was 14, something happened that nearly destroyed her. Thomas Seymour, the uncle of King Edward and the husband of Catherine Parr, Henry's widow, began making advances toward Elizabeth. Seymour was ambitious, reckless, and possibly predatory. He would come into Elizabeth's bedroom in the mornings, tickle her while she was still in bed, slap her bottom, engage in what we would today recognize as sexual harassment, possibly abuse. Catherine Parr, his wife, eventually caught him embracing Elizabeth and sent the girl away, and then, after Catherine died in childbirth, Seymour actually proposed marriage to Elizabeth. She was 15, he was nearly 40, and he was plotting to overthrow Edward's advisors and seize power. The plot was discovered. Seymour was arrested and executed in 1549, and Elizabeth was interrogated aggressively about her relationship with him. Did she agree to marry him? Did she conspire with him? Was she involved in treason? Elizabeth, at 15 years old, handled the interrogation brilliantly. She denied everything. She gave careful, measured answers. She admitted nothing incriminating, and she learned a lesson she would never forget. Love is dangerous. Romance is a trap. Men who claim to love you often want to use you. From that moment on, Elizabeth is extraordinarily careful about her personal relationships. She never marries. She never gives anyone that kind of power over her. When Mary became queen, Elizabeth's life became even more precarious. Mary suspected her of being involved in every Protestant plot, every rebellion. And to be fair, Elizabeth was a natural figurehead for Protestant resistance. She was Henry's daughter, she was Protestant, and she was next in line to the throne. But Elizabeth played her cards perfectly. She tended Catholic Mass. She wrote letters to Mary professing loyalty. She kept her mouth shut. And when she was imprisoned in the Tower after Wyatt's rebellion, she maintained her innocence so convincingly that Mary could not bring herself to execute her. Elizabeth survived through intelligence, patience, and an almost preternatural ability to read people and situations. Now, in 1558, she is queen, and England is a mess. The country is divided between Catholics and Protestants. The treasury is nearly empty. The war with France has been a disaster. Calais is lost. Morale is low. And Elizabeth is a 25-year-old woman in a world that does not believe women can rule. Remember, England has just experienced its first queen regnant, and it did not go well. Mary's reign was marked by persecution, war, and failure. There is a deep skepticism about female rulers. Some people quote the Bible saying women should not have authority over men. Some simply believe women are too emotional, too weak, too irrational to govern. Elizabeth has to prove them wrong, and she does it by being smarter than everyone else in the room. Her first major decision is about religion. England has swung violently between Protestantism and Catholicism for 2 decades. Edward forced radical Protestantism. Mary forced Catholicism. People are exhausted. They want stability. Elizabeth understands this, so she crafts something called the Elizabethan religious settlement. It is a compromise, a middle way. England will be Protestant. The monarch will be supreme governor of the church, not the Pope, but it will be a moderate Protestantism. The services will be in English, but the rituals will retain some Catholic elements. The clergy will be allowed to marry, but churches will still have some traditional decorations. Catholics who attend Church of England services and do not make trouble will be left alone. Radical Protestants who want to purify the church further will be kept in check. It is not perfect. It does not make everyone happy, but it works. It gives England religious peace, relatively speaking, for the first time in decades. Elizabeth also makes it clear she will not persecute people for their private beliefs. She famously says she does not want to make windows into men's souls. What you believe in your heart is between you and God. What matters is outward conformity and loyalty to the crown. It is a pragmatic, tolerant approach, especially compared to Mary's burnings or the religious wars tearing apart France and the Netherlands, and it earns Elizabeth a lot of goodwill. But there is one issue Elizabeth cannot compromise on, and it becomes the defining question of her reign: marriage. Everyone expects her to marry. She is a queen. She needs an heir. She needs a husband to help her govern. At least that is what everyone thinks. Suitors line up. Philip II of Spain. Yes, Mary's widower husband proposes. Elizabeth politely declines. Imagine that conversation. Various European princes, dukes and kings propose. Elizabeth entertains the proposals, flirts a little, drags out negotiations, but never commits. And within England there is one man everyone assumes she will marry: Robert Dudley. Dudley is Elizabeth's childhood friend. They grew up together. He is handsome, charming, athletic. everything a romantic hero should be. And Elizabeth clearly loves him. They spend hours together. They ride, they dance, they laugh. The court gossips constantly about them. Foreign ambassadors report back to their kings. Elizabeth and Dudley are in love, marriage is imminent. But there is a problem. Dudley is already married. His wife, Amy Robsart, lives in the countryside while Dudley serves at court. And then, in September 1560, something shocking happens. Amy Robsart is found dead at the bottom of a staircase, her neck broken. It looks like an accident. Or does it? Rumours fly immediately. Dudley had her killed so he could marry Elizabeth. Or worse, Elizabeth ordered the murder. The scandal is enormous, and it ruins any chance of Elizabeth marrying Dudley. Because if she marries him now, everyone will believe she was complicit in murder. Her reputation will be destroyed. Her legitimacy will be questioned. So Elizabeth does not marry him. She keeps him close. She relies on him. She possibly loves him, but she does not marry him. And Dudley, for his part, remains loyal to her for the rest of his life, despite eventually marrying someone else in secret. Over the years, Elizabeth is courted by dozens of men. The most serious proposal comes from Francis, Duke of Anjou, a French prince. Elizabeth is in her 40s by this time, and Francis is in his 20s. She calls him her frog as a pet name. Historians still debate whether this is affectionate or mocking. The negotiations go on for years. Elizabeth seems genuinely tempted, but in the end she does not marry him either. She never marries anyone, and this is not an accident. This is a strategy. Because as soon as Elizabeth marries, she loses power. A husband would expect to rule. He would make decisions. He would overshadow her. And if she has a child, factions will form around the heir, plotting for the next reign. By staying unmarried, Elizabeth keeps all the power. She is the centre of attention, the sole authority, the focus of the court. She creates a cult of personality around herself. She is the Virgin Queen, married to England, devoted to her people. It is brilliant propaganda. And it works. But there is a cost. Elizabeth has no heir, and that is dangerous. Because if she dies without an heir, England could descend into civil war again. Her advisors beg her to name a successor. She refuses. Because naming a successor is like signing your own death warrant. People will start plotting to replace you with the heir. Elizabeth has seen this happen. She knows the danger. So she keeps everyone guessing. It is risky, but it is also strategic, and somehow she makes it work. Now, there is one person who complicates Elizabeth's reign enormously. Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary is Elizabeth's cousin. They're both great-granddaughters of Henry VII. Mary was Queen of Scotland, then Queen of France through marriage, and many Catholics believe she is the rightful Queen of England because they do not recognise Elizabeth as legitimate. Mary's life is a disaster. She returns to Scotland after her French husband dies, marries a man named Lord Darnley, watches as her husband murders her secretary in front of her while she's pregnant, possibly has an affair with the Earl of Bothwell, is implicated in her husband's murder. Darnley is blown up in a house, marries Bothwell, is forced to abdicate the Scottish throne, and flees to England for protection. It is a soap opera, and Elizabeth does not know what to do with her. Mary arrives in England in 1568, expecting Elizabeth to help her regain her throne. Instead, Elizabeth imprisons her. Not in a dungeon. Mary is kept in comfortable houses with servants and allowances, but she is a prisoner for 19 years, because Mary is too dangerous to set free. She's a Catholic claimant to the English throne. As long as she lives, she is a rallying point for Catholic plots against Elizabeth. And there are plots, so many plots, the Ridolfi Plot in 1571, the Throckmorton Plot in 1583, the Babington Plot in 1586. All of them involve plans to assassinate Elizabeth and put Mary on the throne. All of them are uncovered by Elizabeth's spymaster Francis Walsingham, who runs one of the most effective intelligence networks in Europe. The Babington Plot is the final straw. Walsingham intercepts letters between Mary and the conspirators, letters that prove Mary knew about and approved the plan to kill Elizabeth. It is treason, clear, undeniable treason. Elizabeth's advisers demand Mary's execution. Parliament demands it. The people demand it. But Elizabeth hesitates, because executing a queen, even a deposed, imprisoned queen, is a terrifying precedent. If queens can be executed, where does it stop? What prevents Elizabeth's own subjects from deciding she should die? It is a philosophical and political nightmare. But Mary has left her no choice. In February 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, is beheaded at Fotheringhay Castle. She dies with dignity, forgiving her executioner, praying in Latin. She wears red, the colour of Catholic martyrdom. And Elizabeth, when she hears the news, reportedly rages at her advisers, claiming she never meant for the execution to actually happen. Whether this is genuine shock or political theatre, we will never know. But Mary is dead, and Elizabeth has eliminated the greatest threat to her reign. With Mary gone, Philip II of Spain decides it is time to invade England. Philip has been planning this for years. He is the champion of Catholic Europe. He sees Protestant England as a heretical nation that needs to be brought back to the true faith. He is also angry that English privateers, essentially legal pirates like Francis Drake, have been raiding Spanish ships returning from the Americas, stealing gold and silver. Elizabeth has been covertly funding these raids, claiming she has no control over the privateers, even as she takes a share of the profits. It is glorified piracy, and Spain has had enough. In 1588, Philip assembles the greatest naval force ever seen, the Spanish Armada, 130 ships, 30,000 men. The plan is to sail up the English Channel, meet with Spanish forces in the Netherlands, and invade England. It is an existential threat. If the Armada succeeds, England will be conquered, Elizabeth will be deposed or killed, and Catholicism will be restored. Everything the Tudors built will be destroyed, and that is exactly where our story is heading next. The Spanish Armada, the moment when England, a small island nation, faces the greatest superpower in the world, the battle that will define Elizabeth's reign and cement England's place as a rising power. It is one of the most famous military encounters in history, and the outcome, well, you will have to stay with us to find out exactly how it all unfolds, because this is the moment when everything Elizabeth has built is put to the test, when Spain comes for her crown, and when England discovers what it truly means to fight for survival. Summer 1588. England is about to face the greatest invasion threat in its history, and the man leading that threat, King Philip II of Spain, the most powerful monarch in the world. Philip rules Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, chunks of Italy, and a vast empire in the Americas that pumps gold and silver into his treasury. His army is legendary, disciplined, experienced, feared across Europe. His navy controls the Mediterranean. He is, by every measure, unstoppable, and he is coming for England. A small, relatively poor island nation with a navy that is good, but not great, and an army that is, well, let us just say England has not fought a major land war in decades. On paper, this should not even be a contest. Spain should crush England like an ant. But history, as we are about to see, does not always follow the script. Philip's plan is actually quite clever. The Spanish Armada, 130 ships carrying around 30,000 men, will sail from Spain up the English Channel. Meanwhile, the Duke of Parma, commanding a massive Spanish army in the Netherlands, will prepare barges and boats with another 27,000 soldiers. The Armada will protect Parma's forces as they cross the narrow seas to England. Once they land, probably somewhere in Kent near London, the combined Spanish forces will march on the capital. England has no standing army capable of stopping them. The plan is solid, the resources are overwhelming, and Philip is confident. He calls the fleet the Great and Most Fortunate Navy, but the English have another name for it, coined later, the Invincible Armada. Though, as we will see, invincible is about to become deeply ironic. Now, why is Philip doing this? We talked about his anger over English privateers raiding Spanish ships. We mentioned his desire to restore Catholicism. But there is something more personal here. Philip was married to Mary Tudor. He was King of England, technically, for a few years. And when Mary died and Elizabeth took over, Philip lost that connection. He proposed to Elizabeth. She turned him down. He has watched as Elizabeth supported Dutch rebels fighting against Spanish rule in the Netherlands. He has watched as she executed Mary, Queen of Scots, his ally. And he has watched as English pirates, with Elizabeth's covert blessing, have stolen millions in Spanish gold. This invasion is not just about religion or politics. It is personal. Philip wants to punish Elizabeth. He wants to show the world that Spain is supreme, and he genuinely believes God is on his side, that this is a holy mission. The Armada sets sail in May 1588 from Lisbon, but almost immediately things start going wrong. Storms batter the fleet, ships are damaged, supplies spoil. The fleet has to return to port for repairs. It is a bad omen, but Philip orders them to try again. On July 19th, the Armada is sighted off the coast of Cornwall, the southwestern tip of England. Beacons are lit along the coast, signal fires that relay the message. They are here. The invasion is beginning. In Plymouth, the English fleet prepares to set sail. The commander is Lord Howard of Effingham, an experienced nobleman. But the real star, the man everyone knows, is Francis Drake. Drake is a legend, a privateer, an explorer, the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe. He is also, from Spain's perspective, a pirate and a criminal. There is a famous story, probably embellished, that when the warning comes that the Armada has been sighted, Drake is playing bowls on Plymouth Hoe, and he reportedly says, "We have time to finish the game and beat the Spaniards too." Whether or not this actually happened, it captures Drake's reputation. Cool, confident, almost recklessly brave. The English fleet is smaller than the Armada, maybe 50 to 60 warships, plus a bunch of smaller vessels. But the English ships have advantages. They are faster, more manoeuvrable, and crucially they have better long-range guns. The Spanish ships are built for a different kind of naval warfare, boarding actions. The idea is you sail close to the enemy ship, grapple it, and your soldiers board it and fight hand to hand. Spanish soldiers are the best in Europe at this. But English ships are designed to keep their distance and pound the enemy with cannon fire. It is a clash of doctrines, and terrain, or in this case the sea, is about to matter a lot. For 9 days the two fleets skirmish up the English Channel. The Spanish sail in a tight crescent formation, the larger, slower galleons in the centre, smaller ships protecting the flanks. It is a defensive formation, hard to break. The English harass them, firing from long range, trying to pick off stragglers, but they cannot land a decisive blow. The Spanish keep moving forward. They are disciplined, organised, following the plan. By August 6th, The Armada reaches Calais on the French coast. They anchor there, waiting for the Duke of Parma to bring his army across from the Netherlands. This is the critical moment. If Parma can get his troops onto the Spanish ships, if the combined force can land in England, the invasion succeeds. But Parma has a problem. He is not ready. His barges are not prepared. The Dutch rebel fleet is blockading the ports. He needs more time, and time is exactly what the English are not going to give him. On the night of August 7th, the English launch a devastating attack. Fire ships. They take 8 old ships, pack them with gunpowder, tar and anything flammable, set them on fire, and send them drifting toward the anchored Spanish fleet. Imagine you are a Spanish sailor. It is night. The sea is dark. And suddenly you see ships, massive, floating infernos, coming straight at you. Panic spreads. The Spanish captains order their ships to cut their anchor cables and flee. The formation breaks. Ships scatter in all directions. The Armada is still intact. None of the fire ships actually hit their targets, but the damage is done. The formation is broken. The tight defensive crescent is gone, and the English fleet moves in for the kill. The next morning, August 8th, the Battle of Gravelines begins. It is the decisive engagement. The English ships close in, firing relentlessly at the now dispersed Spanish fleet. The Spanish try to fight back, but they are outgunned and outmaneuvered. Several Spanish ships are sunk or run aground. Hundreds of Spanish soldiers and sailors are killed. The Spanish formation is in chaos, and then, as if the universe itself is taking sides, the weather changes. A strong wind picks up, blowing from the south. It pushes the Armada north, away from the English coast, away from Parma's army, away from any chance of invasion. The Spanish try to regroup, but it is hopeless. The invasion is over. The only question now is, can they get home? The Spanish commander, the Duke of Medina Sidonia, makes a fateful decision. They cannot sail back down the English Channel. The English fleet would destroy them. So they will sail north, around Scotland, and down around Ireland back to Spain. It is a longer route, but it should be safer. Except they are running low on food and water. The ships are damaged. The men are exhausted. And the North Atlantic in August is brutal. Storms batter the fleet. Ships are blown off course. Some crash into the rocky coasts of Scotland and Ireland. Crews, desperate for water and food, come ashore and are often killed by locals or captured by English forces. It is a disaster. Of the 130 ships that left Spain, fewer than 60 make it back. Around 15,000 men die, most of them not in battle, but from storms, starvation, disease, and shipwreck. The invincible Armada has been destroyed, and England has survived. But let us be clear about something. The English did not win this battle through superior tactics or heroism alone. Yes, the English ships were better designed. Yes, Drake and Howard were skilled commanders. But the real hero of the Armada's defeat? The weather. The storms that delayed the Armada's departure. The winds that scattered the fleet at Gravelines. The brutal North Atlantic storms that sank ship after ship on the journey home. The English naturally claim this as proof that God is on their side. They mint a medal that says God blew and they were scattered. It is brilliant propaganda. And it works. Because the message is clear. We are right. God is with us, and even the greatest power in the world cannot defeat us. Elizabeth, meanwhile, handles the crisis brilliantly. While the Armada is approaching, she does something extraordinary. She goes to Tilbury, where English troops are gathered in case of invasion. She reviews the troops, and she gives a speech, one of the most famous speeches in English history. She appears before the soldiers wearing armour, or at least a breastplate over a white gown, riding a white horse, and she says, "I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm." It is a masterclass in leadership. She acknowledges the doubts people have about her. She's a woman, women are seen as weak, and then she flips it. She claims the strength and courage of a king while being a queen, and the troops love her for it. They would follow her anywhere. Now, here is a fun historical debate. Did that speech actually happen? Or is it, like Drake's Game of Bowls, a legend that grew over time? The earliest written account of the speech comes from a letter written years later, and historians argue about its authenticity. But you know what? Even if she never said those exact words, even if the speech is partly invented, it does not matter. Because the image of Elizabeth at Tilbury, the warrior queen, the defiant monarch, the woman who refuses to be underestimated, that image becomes reality. That is how she is remembered. That is the Elizabeth who enters history. The defeat of the Armada transforms England. Suddenly, this small island nation has beaten the greatest superpower in the world. English confidence soars. Patriotism explodes. The idea of England as a chosen nation protected by God, blessed with destiny, takes root. And Elizabeth? She becomes Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the greatest monarch England has ever had. Her reign becomes the standard against which all future rulers are measured. And Spain? Spain never fully recovers. Philip tries to send more armadas in the 1590s, but none are as large or as threatening. The 1588 Armada bankrupts Spain, weakens its navy, and marks the beginning of Spain's long decline. England, meanwhile, is on the rise. The seeds of the British Empire are being planted. The age of English naval dominance is beginning, all because of a battle, a storm, and a queen who refused to give up. But here is the thing. Elizabeth does not have much time left to enjoy her triumph. She has won the greatest victory of her reign, yes, but the cost has been enormous. The war with Spain drags on. Her treasury is drained. Her closest friends are dying. Robert Dudley, the love of her life, dies just weeks after the Armada's defeat. Elizabeth is getting older, more isolated, more melancholy. And the question of succession still hangs over everything. She has no heir. She refuses to name one. And as the years pass, as the 1590s roll on, people start to wonder, what happens when she dies? Will there be another civil war? Will England descend into chaos again? The Golden Age, for all its glory, has a shadow, and that shadow grows longer with each passing year. In our next part, we're going to explore that Golden Age in all its complexity. The England of Shakespeare and Marlowe, of explorers and adventurers, of brilliant achievements and terrible injustices. Because the Elizabethan era is not just a fairy tale. It is a time of incredible creativity and horrific violence, of soaring ambition and crushing poverty, of exploration and exploitation. It is the best of times and the worst of times, all rolled into one. And Elizabeth, at the centre of it all, is trying to hold it together as her health fails and her reign moves toward its inevitable end. Stay with us. We're almost at the finish line, and the story is about to get even more interesting. Golden ages are never quite as golden as we remember them. They shine in retrospect, polished by time and nostalgia, until we forget the tarnish underneath. The Elizabethan era, the age of Shakespeare, of exploration, of England's triumphant rise, is remembered as a time of glory, and in many ways, it was. But it was also a time of poverty, disease, violence, and exploitation. A time when brilliance and brutality walked hand in hand. So let us step into this golden age and see it for what it really was. Not a fairy tale, but a complex, messy, fascinating reality. Because understanding the darkness makes the light even more remarkable. Let us start with the light, because there is genuine brilliance here. The late 1500s are a cultural explosion in England. Literature, theatre, music, art, all of it flourishes under Elizabeth's reign. And the most famous name from this era, William Shakespeare. Now, in 1588, when the Armada is defeated, Shakespeare is just 24 years old. He's an actor and playwright in London, still finding his voice. Over the next 2 decades, he will write some of the greatest works in the English language: Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, A Midsummer Night's Dream, 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and lines that are still quoted today, 400 years later. To be or not to be? All the world's a stage. What's in a name? Shakespeare does not just entertain, he captures the human condition. Love, ambition, jealousy, honour, betrayal. His characters feel real because they are real. They are us. And Shakespeare is not alone. Christopher Marlowe, another playwright, writes Dr. Faustus and the Jew of Malta. Dark, powerful works that push the boundaries of drama. Edmund Spenser writes The Fairy Queen, an epic poem celebrating Elizabeth as Gloriana, the Fairy Queen. The English language itself is expanding, evolving, becoming more flexible and expressive. New words are being invented, poetry is being refined. This is the birth of modern English literature. And it is happening because Elizabeth supports it. She attends plays, she patronizes artists, she creates an environment where creativity can thrive. The theatre becomes the entertainment of the masses. Rich and poor alike pack into playhouses like the Globe to watch these stories unfold. It is a cultural renaissance. But let us talk about what life is actually like for most people in Elizabethan England. Because while Shakespeare is writing masterpieces, the average person is struggling to survive. London in the 1590s is a city of around 200,000 people, crammed into narrow streets with open sewers. Disease is rampant. Plague outbreaks close the theatres regularly, sometimes for months at a time. In 1593, a particularly bad outbreak kills around 15,000 Londoners, 1 in 13 people, dead in a single year, and there is no understanding of how disease spreads, no effective treatment. If you get the plague, you are probably going to die, horribly, with swollen lymph nodes, fever, delirium. Your family will paint a red cross on your door, and you will be sealed inside to prevent contamination. It is medieval, it is terrifying, and it is just part of life. Poverty is also widespread. England's population is growing, around 4 million people by 1600, but the economy is not growing fast enough to keep up. Wages are stagnant, food prices are rising. Poor harvests in the 1590s lead to food shortages, even famine in some areas. The gap between rich and poor is enormous. The nobility live in grand estates, wear silk and velvet, feast on multiple courses. The poor live in one-room hovels, wear rags, and survive on bread and thin soup. If you are poor and cannot work, you are at the mercy of charity or the new poor laws, which are harsh and inadequate. Beggars and vagrants are common sights. Some are whipped and branded as punishment for not having work. It is a brutal system. Now let us talk about exploration, because this is the age of English adventurers sailing to the far corners of the earth. Francis Drake, as we mentioned, circumnavigates the globe between 1577 and 1580, only the second person to do so after Magellan. He returns with a ship full of Spanish treasure. making Elizabeth and his investors fabulously wealthy. Walter Raleigh, another adventurer, explores the coast of North America and attempts to establish a colony in Virginia. The colony fails. Famously, the settlers of Roanoke Island disappear, leaving behind only the word Croatoan carved into a post. It is one of history's great unsolved mysteries, but the attempts continue. England wants a piece of the New World. It wants the wealth, the resources, the glory, and it is willing to do almost anything to get it. And here is where we need to talk about the darkness, because English exploration is not just about discovery, it is about exploitation. Raleigh and others are not just mapping coastlines, they are looking for gold, for land to claim, for people to subjugate. And England is also getting involved in the transatlantic slave trade. John Hawkins, an English naval commander and privateer, makes 3 voyages to West Africa in the 1560s, where he captures or buys enslaved Africans and transports them to the Caribbean to be sold to Spanish colonists. It is the beginning of England's participation in one of history's greatest atrocities. The slave trade will grow enormously in the coming centuries, but the seeds are planted here in Elizabeth's reign. This is not something the Golden Age mythology talks about much, but it is part of the story, a dark, shameful part. Elizabeth herself is complicit in this. She invests in Hawkins's voyages. She profits from them. She also authorises brutal campaigns in Ireland. England has been trying to control Ireland for centuries, and under Elizabeth the violence intensifies. English forces burn crops, destroy villages, massacre civilians, all in the name of subjugating the Irish and suppressing Catholic resistance. Tens of thousands of Irish people die from violent starvation and disease. English commanders describe the Irish as savages, as less than human. It is colonialism in its rawest, cruelest form, and it is happening on Elizabeth's watch with her approval. So when we talk about the Elizabethan Golden Age, we need to hold both truths at once. This is a time of incredible artistic achievement and terrible human suffering, of exploration and exploitation, of genius and brutality. It is not simple, it is not clean, it is history in all its complexity. Now, let us talk about Elizabeth herself in these later years, because the Queen who defeated the Armada is aging. By the 1590s she's in her 60s. Her face is painted with thick white makeup, lead-based cosmetics that are slowly poisoning her. Her hair is thinning, she wears elaborate wigs, her teeth are blackened and rotting, a result of the Elizabethan love of sugar, which is a rare and expensive luxury. She still dresses magnificently, still plays the role of the Virgin Queen, but underneath the costume she is tired. Her closest friends and advisers are dying. Robert Dudley, her great love, died in 1588. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, her most trusted adviser for 40 years, dies in 1598. Francis Walsingham, her spymaster, dies in 1590. She is losing the people who knew her best, who supported her from the beginning, and she feels it. She becomes more melancholy, more isolated, more irritable. And then there is the Essex Rebellion. This is the final great crisis of her reign, and it breaks her heart. Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, is one of Elizabeth's favourites in the 1590s. He is young, 30 years younger than Elizabeth, handsome, charming, ambitious. He is also reckless and arrogant. Elizabeth promotes him, gives him commands, indulges his tantrums, but Essex overreaches. In 1599 he is sent to Ireland to put down a rebellion. He fails spectacularly, negotiates an unauthorised truce, and then abandons his post and storms back to England. He bursts into Elizabeth's private chambers unannounced. She's not yet dressed, not yet wearing her wig or makeup, not yet the public queen. It is a shocking breach of protocol. Elizabeth is furious. She strips him of his offices, confines him to house arrest. Essex, humiliated and desperate, does something unforgivable. In February 1601, he attempts a coup. He marches into London with around 200 armed supporters, expecting the people to rise up and join him. They do not. The coup collapses within hours. Essex is arrested, tried for treason and executed. He is 34 years old, and Elizabeth, who loved him in her way, who saw him almost as a son, has to sign his death warrant. It is the final brutal reminder that even affection cannot protect you from the consequences of treason. Even queens have to make terrible choices. Elizabeth's final years are marked by sadness. She holds court, she performs her duties, but the energy is gone. In 1601, she gives a speech to Parliament that becomes known as the Golden Speech. She thanks them for their loyalty, she reflects on her reign, and she says something remarkable. "Though God hath raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves. It is not about power or conquest. It is about connection, about the relationship between the Queen and her people, and it is deeply moving. Because for all her faults, for all the darkness of her reign, Elizabeth genuinely cares about being loved. She has spent 43 years on the throne, and she still wants her people to know, I did this for you." By early 1603, Elizabeth is clearly failing. She refuses to eat. She refuses to go to bed. She spends days sitting on cushions on the floor, unable or unwilling to rest. Her advisors beg her to name a successor. Finally, on her deathbed, she reportedly gestures or whispers that James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary Queen of Scots, the woman Elizabeth executed, should succeed her. It is fitting in a tragic way. The son of her greatest enemy becomes her heir. On March 24th, 1603, Elizabeth dies at Richmond Palace. She is 69 years old. She's reigned for 44 years, and with her death the Tudor dynasty ends. The reaction to her death is extraordinary. The entire nation mourns. People weep in the streets. Church bells toll. There is a genuine sense of loss, of an era ending. Elizabeth is buried in Westminster Abbey with full honours. Her funeral procession is one of the most elaborate in English history. And here is the beautiful, bittersweet irony. She is buried next to her half-sister Mary. The two sisters who fought, who represented opposing visions of England, lie side by side in death. The Protestant Queen and the Catholic Queen together forever. Their tomb inscription reads, "Partners in throne and grave, here we sleep Elizabeth and Mary, sisters in hope of the resurrection." It is a message of reconciliation, of unity, that neither achieved in life. So what is Elizabeth's legacy? On one hand, she saved England. She navigated religious wars, assassination plots, and an invasion by the greatest superpower of the age. She established a stable, moderate religious settlement. She presided over a cultural flowering that gave the world Shakespeare. She turned England from a second-rate power into a nation ready to build an empire. On the other hand, she profited from slavery. She authorized brutal campaigns in Ireland. She never solved the succession crisis until the very end. She could be cruel, vindictive, and politically ruthless. She is not a saint. But she is not a monster either. She is a survivor who became a legend. And that brings us to the end, the final chapter of the Tudor story. Because Elizabeth's death is not just the end of her reign, it is the end of a dynasty. The Tudors, who began with Henry VII's desperate gamble at Bosworth Field, who gave England Henry VIII's break with Rome, who survived Edward's brief reign and Mary's bloody persecution, who achieved greatness under Elizabeth. The Tudors are finished. James VI of Scotland becomes James I of England, uniting the two crowns for the first time. The Stuart era begins, and England will never be quite the same. In our final part, we're going to step back and look at the big picture. What did the Tudors really change? What did they leave behind? And why, 500 years later, are we still obsessed with this family? Stay with me. One more chapter, and then we rest. Every dynasty tells a story, and the story the Tudors tell is one of the most dramatic, violent, and transformative in all of history. From 1485 to 1603, just 118 years, this one family took England from a war-torn medieval kingdom and turned it into a nation poised to dominate the world stage. They broke with the most powerful religious institution in Europe. They executed queens and saints and rebels. They created art that still moves us and committed atrocities that still shame us. And when the last Tudor died, childless and alone, the dynasty ended. But the legacy is still shaping our world today. So let us step back and ask the big questions. What did the Tudors really change? What did they leave behind? And why, after 5 centuries, can we not stop talking about them? Let us start with religion, because this is arguably the Tudors' biggest impact. Before Henry VIII, England was Catholic. The Pope in Rome had authority over English souls. Monasteries dotted the landscape. The Church owned vast amounts of land and wealth. The rhythm of life, baptisms, marriages, funerals, holy days, was Catholic. And then Henry wanted a divorce. One man's marital problems led to the English Reformation, the break with Rome, the dissolution of the monasteries, the creation of the Church of England. And here we are, nearly 500 years later, and the Church of England still exists. The British monarch is still the supreme governor of the Church. Defender of the Faith is still a royal title. Ironic, given that it was originally granted by the Pope to Henry for defending Catholicism against Martin Luther. The Tudors reshaped English religion permanently. They set England on a Protestant path that would define its identity, its conflicts, and its global influence for centuries. But let us be clear, the Tudors did not do this because they were enlightened reformers with a vision of religious freedom. They did it for power, for money, for personal reasons. Henry wanted to remarry. Edward was a zealot. Mary wanted to restore what she saw as truth. Elizabeth wanted stability. None of them believed in religious tolerance the way we understand it today. They all executed people for their beliefs. They all used religion as a tool of control. But the unintended consequence of their actions was that England became religiously distinct from Catholic Europe. And that distinctiveness fostered a sense of national identity. England was not just another European kingdom, it was different, special, chosen by God, or so the propaganda claimed. And that identity, that sense of exceptionalism, would fuel English ambitions for centuries. Now let us talk about government and power. The Tudors were not democrats. Far from it. They were absolute monarchs who believed they ruled by divine right. But they also understood that they needed support from Parliament, from the nobility, from the people. Henry VIII used Parliament to legitimize his break with Rome, to pass the Act of Supremacy, to dissolve the monasteries. He set a precedent. Major changes required parliamentary approval. Elizabeth, too, worked with Parliament. She listened to their concerns, she negotiated, she compromised when necessary. She understood that even an absolute monarch needs allies, and this relationship, this tense, complicated, often contentious relationship between Crown and Parliament, would eventually lead to the English Civil War in the 1640s and ultimately to constitutional monarchy. The Tudors did not intend to weaken royal power, but their reliance on Parliament planted seeds that would grow into something they never imagined. A system where Parliament, not the monarch, holds ultimate authority. The Tudors also transformed England's economy. When Henry VII won at Bosworth, England was relatively poor and isolated. By the time Elizabeth died, England was a player on the world stage. Trade expanded, wool exports boomed. English merchants established trading companies. The Muscovy Company, the Levant Company, the East India Company. These companies would become the engines of empire. English privateers raided Spanish treasure ships bringing wealth home. English explorers mapped new coastlines. The foundations of the British Empire were being laid. Now we have to acknowledge the cost. The wealth came from exploitation, from piracy, from slavery, from the brutal subjugation of Ireland. The Golden Age was built on blood and suffering, but it was also built on ambition, innovation, and a willingness to take risks. The Tudors turned England outward, toward the world, and that orientation would define British history for the next 3 centuries. Let us also talk about culture. The Tudors were patrons of the arts. Henry VIII, for all his faults, was a musician and a poet. Elizabeth supported playwrights and musicians. The court was a place where artists could thrive if they pleased the monarch, and the flowering of English literature under Elizabeth is unmatched. Shakespeare, Marlowe, Spenser. These are titans of world literature. Their works have been translated into every major language. They are performed, studied, adapted, reimagined. They are immortal, and they emerged in Elizabethan England because there was an audience, a theatre culture, a language that was evolving and expanding. The Tudors did not create Shakespeare, but they created the world in which Shakespeare could flourish. Now, let us talk about the Tudors themselves, the people, because dynasties are not abstract forces. They're made up of individuals with flaws, fears, desires, and the Tudors are fascinatingly human. Henry VII, paranoid and miserly, who won a crown he never felt secure wearing. Henry VIII, the Golden Prince who became a tyrant, who married 6 times and executed 2 wives, who broke England apart in pursuit of a son. Edward VI, the boy king who never got to be a boy, who died at 15 with his religious dreams unfulfilled. Mary I, the tragic queen who wanted so desperately to heal England and ended up burning it, and Elizabeth, the survivor, the strategist, the virgin queen who turned her refusal to marry into a source of power. These are not simple villains or heroes. They are complicated, contradictory, deeply flawed people who shaped history. And here is why we are still obsessed with them. They are a mirror. Their struggles, power, love, legitimacy, mortality, are universal. We see ourselves in them. Henry VIII's desperate need for a son, his fear of his own mortality, his inability to accept that he cannot control everything. These are human fears magnified by absolute power. Elizabeth's loneliness, her refusal to trust, her determination to survive in a world that underestimated her, these resonate. The Tudors remind us that even the most powerful people are still just people. They make mistakes, they hurt others, they love and lose and fail, and that makes them endlessly fascinating. But let us also ask, what did the Tudors get wrong? Where did they fail? Well, succession, for one. Every single Tudor monarch struggled with this. Henry VII faced pretenders. Henry VIII executed 2 wives and declared 2 daughters illegitimate in his quest for a son. Edward tried to change the succession and died before he could secure it. Mary had no children. Elizabeth refused to name an heir until the very end. The Tudors were terrible at ensuring smooth transitions of power. They were lucky that England did not descend into civil war again, and they were also terrible at mercy. The body count of the Tudor era is staggering. Executions, rebellions, burnings, wars. Thousands upon thousands of people died because of Tudor policies. Some were guilty of real crimes, many were not. The Tudors ruled through fear as much as through love, and that is a dark legacy. So what is the final verdict? Were the Tudors great, or were they just powerful, and is there a difference? I think the answer is, they were both. They were great in the sense that they changed the course of history. England in 1603 was unrecognisable compared to England in 1485. The Tudors did that. But greatness does not mean goodness. The Tudors were ruthless, often cruel, willing to sacrifice individuals for what they saw as the greater good. They built a nation, but they did it with blood. They created a golden age, but underneath the gold was suffering. They are a reminder that history is not clean, that progress has costs, that the people we celebrate often did terrible things, and yet we cannot help but be drawn to them, to their drama, to their ambition, to the sheer audacity of it all. A dynasty that started with a desperate battle in a muddy field and ended with the greatest Queen England ever had. A family that tore the country apart and then stitched it back together in a new form. A story of power, wives, and blood that still captivates us 500 years later. So here is what we can take from the Tudors. First, survival is an art. Every Tudor monarch, every key figure we have discussed, survived by being smart, adaptable, and sometimes ruthless. They read people. They calculated risks. They knew when to fight and when to retreat. Second, power is fragile. Even kings and queens, with all their armies and wealth, were never truly secure. They lived in constant fear of rebellion, betrayal, death. Absolute power did not bring absolute peace. Third, legacies are complicated. The Tudors did great things and terrible things, often at the same time. They cannot be reduced to heroes or villains. They were human, and that is what makes them worth studying. And finally, change is inevitable. The medieval world the Tudors inherited was gone by the time they finished. The religious landscape was transformed. The political landscape was transformed. The cultural landscape was transformed. The Tudors did not just witness change, they caused it. They shaped it. They rode the wave of history and tried to control where it went. They did not always succeed, but they tried. And in trying, they created something that lasted far beyond their lifetimes. So as we close this chapter, as we say goodbye to the Tudors, let us remember them for what they were: complicated, ambitious, flawed, extraordinary people who lived in extraordinary times. They were not perfect. They were not always good. But they were undeniably significant, and their story, full of drama, passion, violence, triumph and tragedy, is a story that will never get old, because it is at its heart a story about us, about what we are capable of for better and for worse. Thank you for taking this journey with me through the complete history of the Tudors, from the blood-soaked fields of Bosworth to the death of Elizabeth. We have walked through 118 years of some of the most dramatic history the world has ever seen. I hope you have found it as fascinating as I have. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the past, please let me know in the comments. Tell me which Tudor figure intrigued you most. Tell me what surprised you. Tell me what you would like to explore next. Because there are so many more stories to tell, so many more chapters of history waiting to be uncovered, and I cannot wait to share them with you. Until then, rest well. Dream of kings and queens, of battles and betrayals, of a time when England was forged in fire. And remember, history is not just about the past. It is about understanding who we are and how we got here. The Tudors are gone, but their story lives on. Good night.